Testing. Can you hear us? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
What's me? We hear you now. Is that Christian? Kristen, it sounds like they're working on it.
Jenna, this is Bob. I can hear you. It might be me. Hang on.
We have visual. We don't have audio from the mayor.
place, but that's we'll have to start getting crews on it.
And we're projecting it'll be
We have audio.
okay. 2 to 4. So pretty exciting.
Use full on buses or do they have shuttles?
No, they're
Are we good?
school buses that have been converted
Oh,
to
thumbs up.
like
Mr.
ones
Mayor.
like if you're
I said public will get love.
Yeah. Okay.
TV and that. So one is really nice. The other one is
Perfect. We have video.
Good.
All
All right, Hannah, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you guys. We can see you guys.
All right.
Thank you guys for working through that.
And thank you for your patience, everybody. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so we're going to move on to G2, which is an ordinance for appeal, preamble on that. So this is in the event there's an appeal of a P and Z or a decision made by a decision maker on the development services. So currently, one thing to note is it's 10/51/26. It is tied to also 10/51/24. That was just 2 different years. So we will be changing that to be 26 on everything. So that's just a little clerical thing we'll do. So don't get confused by 10/51/24 versus 26. They're all part of the same. Well, the way it's written, it's for a free review by council. My recommendation is we keep that because I feel that council should have the opportunity to look over a P&Z decision. Because you never know, there might be a case where P&Z may not have done anything necessarily wrong, but you may have a different take on a situation. An example would be, let's say a cell tower is approved by P&Z because of Med Code. They follow the code. However, there's nuances to something like that, like does it fit in with the neighborhood? Is that something we want in that part of town? And I think that's where council can come and review that and potentially change a P&Z decision. Rarely happens. We also, another situation, we may have a P&Z that might be new or not as experienced and might overlook some things, and we want to look at their decision. Now, that doesn't mean we can just say, no, you have to be able to have a reasoned statement of why you do that per Mr. Wadham's instructions. And so that's why I would recommend that we keep the free review, because there could be nuances, there could be changes on the zone. And I think as council members and elected officials, you should retain that right. And so and it's also rare. So very rarely does that happen. But in the event that there's things that you want to look at or change, that you have the ability to do that. So that's kind of my take on that. And so again, this is appeals. And then we're also going to hear in another resolution reconsideration. They're different. So we'll talk about that when we get down to G6. So that's my statement on the 10/51/26. And so Mr. Wadhams or Ms. Thornborough, any comment before we open the public hearing?
Thank you, Mayor. You did a great introduction and for the matter. Just to orient the council a little bit more, the staff reports are for the next 3 agenda items, I believe. So it'll be number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5, all those items. And the requests tonight are to hold a public hearing for ordinance 10/51/24/26, approve and have the 3rd reading of the ordinance, and then provided that it's ready tonight, and then approve the decision document of CPA fiscal year 2024 number 5, provided that the ordinance is ready tonight. I think the crux of the matter tonight is what the mayor has already opened and presented to you, really battling with that free review, which is how it is drafted right now as a free review, but on the record. Page, this matter starts on page 32 of your packet. And on page 33, there are the changes that have occurred since the second reading. And then on page 35, there's a document that attempts to go through cleanly as possible with a note to the reader explaining what each one of those changes are. On page 70, there's a version without strike through, and that is easier for many people to read, not having to go through the strike through. Then on page 88 is the ordinance itself. And on page 118 is the decision document. For the record, I did have a meeting with Councilmember Carver Herbert earlier today, and she provided handwritten notes to me. And so I won't capture all of the notes here. A lot of her notes were editorial in nature, some with some suggested edits to clarify language that might be a little awkward, or other clerical matters. She did note that she would be in favor of a couple of new definition. One within the section of itself, talking about what good cause is. And then what constitutes standing is another definition. She had noted that perhaps moving the noticing table into the public hearing policy might keep everything together and be useful for those trying to utilize the policy. And noted that she is not in favor of the proposed required finding for design review, that instead of how it's currently drafted is that the project is doing this off of, let me find it exactly, but
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Farnborough, are you referring to the scale and intensity on
yes.
page? Actually, I forgot to write the page down too, but.
So there is a finding that requires that a project is compatible with the neighborhood in scale and intensity. Staff has suggested that could be better noted as the finding is that application is in compliance with the neighborhood as identified in the comprehensive plan. Staff's reasoning for that is because the comprehensive plan sets the future vision of a neighborhood, and trying to think of an example that perhaps you have an area that's full of non-compliant, let's say storage yards that are dilapidated, and somebody comes through with a nice new development that really meets the intent of the comprehensive plan in that area. And if we say that it's the neighborhood as stands, perhaps there would open the door to deny that application versus looking at the comprehensive plan's designation. And that's the reasoning to narrow down that the intent is to follow the vision of the neighborhood as defined by the neighborhood versus the current status. And with that, I did not do justice to all of the work that Councilmember Carver Herbert provided to staff, but that's high level ones that staff did want to highlight in case she didn't in your discussion. And with that, I stand for questions.
Okay. So my plan with the public hearing is open the public hearing and then keep it open during deliberations, because if there's substantial changes, we probably won't have the adopted published. We will have to have staff come back and make those changes for a future council meeting, probably in a month. And so, but if we feel we've got it robust enough and we want to close the public hearing, we will. So we'll just kind of see how the deliberations go and what changes you want to make to the ordinance before we close the public hearing. That was the recommendation by Mr. Wadums.
It is, Mr. Mayor, can I just give a quick legal summary as well?
You may.
Thank you. And that is correct. That is my recommendation. So, Mayor, members of the council, just briefly, on page 124 through 134 of your packet, I included a memorandum. It's an old memorandum, but what it is, it's the memorandum from planning that I provided to planning and zoning in 2025. To refresh your memory, this ordinance has been kicked around for a couple of years. We were intentionally delaying it or waiting until we had the interfaith case, the Idaho Supreme Court case, Veterans Neighborhood Association versus City of Boise and Interfaith Sanctuary. That case had several rulings or holdings in it, though the one takeaway I want to talk about tonight and ask for deliberations on tonight is I think the Idaho Supreme Court has been really clear that the code has to specify what the standard of review is, and then whatever that is, the council has to follow it. And where Boise got in trouble was at the time their code said the standard of review was an abuse of discretion standard. And then the council didn't follow that standard. They looked at it as a free review. And so they basically disagreed with planning and zoning. And so they reversed planning and zoning, but that wasn't the right standard of review. They didn't follow their code. And that's where things went bad for the city of Boise. So what I'm going to recommend is the way it's drafted is its appeals would be on the record. So no new evidence. It would be on the record only. And the standard of review would be a free review, meaning that if you review it fresh, you don't have to look, basically don't even have to look at what planning and zoning did. If it's an abuse of discretion standard, however, then you do have to look at what planning and zoning did, and you have to find that they've made a mistake. Some kind of abuse of discretion. What they did was arbitrary and capricious, and there's like 5 or 6 criteria you can look at. But I think it's really important, first of all, for the council to decide the standard of review. Do you want it on the record, or do you want new evidence, or do you, and then what's the standard of review? Deference, or abuse of discretion, or a free review, and then we can go from there. The way it's currently written, if that's the standard of review, I still will ask for a continuance at the end of this public hearing because some of the definitions are for abuse of discretion standard, but it's written as free review standard. So once I get clarification, then Ms. Thornborough and I can go back, get it all cleaned up, and get it back on the agenda. But everything flows from what you guys, mayor and council, want, particularly council, in terms of the standard of review. And I included that memo so you could see the pros and cons. I provided that to planning and zoning, and I provided it to you because there are pros and cons on which standard of review you pick. And I've articulated that in the memo. And with that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Wadums?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page?
Mr. Wadums, just to procedurally, for note-taking purposes, how do we articulate that the public hearing is closed while deliberations are going if we're going to commingle those?
Mayor, council president, if that's the direction we're headed, then I would recommend that you keep the public hearing open, and then you can go into deliberation, and then you can continue deliberation. So both public hearing and deliberation would be continued to a date certain. And then that way we don't have noticing issues, because if there's substantial changes to this, then we would have to notice it up again to give everybody an opportunity to respond. But if we continue the public hearing, I think anybody that's interested can follow it along the process. So,
And we don't have to renotice.
The goal is to not have to renotice it.
Thank you, Mr. Wadums. Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page?
may I ask a question of my colleagues?
You may.
I'd like to start with Councilmember Kent Rasmussen, because of your experience in running meetings. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council President. My feelings on this are I always tend to lean towards the cleanest solution possible. So I appreciate Mr. Wadums' diligent efforts on these memos and reading all those, and it really gave me a lot to consider. But after all that, I still came down on the standard of review that says,
Mr. Rasmussen.
Yes.
Sorry, council member, on the idea of commingling the public hearing
I'm
with
sorry.
deliberation.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd love to hear your opinions on the other thing too.
I'm sorry, I
but-
jumped ahead. didn't
But we
I?
are not there.
No, I'm fine. I think that's fine. I think that's a good approach.
Are there any
for what we're
objections?
trying to do with this? Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen, any objections?
On this issue, I will go with the majority of the council.
Councilmember Carver Herbert.
I actually am in agreement with taking this approach.
Okay, thank you.
All right. With that, any more questions for Mr. Wadhams before we move on?
Your legal department is good going into public meeting.
All right. So with that,
Mr. Mayor, I
yeah,
apologize.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Mr. Roddams, I do want to get some clarification and elicit a little bit more, expand on something that Director Thornborough brought up. When we start referencing the comprehensive plan, I want to ensure and be very clear that is not code. And so when we start talking about enforcing the comp plan, there's nothing there to enforce, correct? Because it is not code.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, a comp plan is a vision for the future. It is not binding or controlling. It's generally good to be consistent with code, or I think that's standard is consistent or not in conflict with comprehensive plan. But at the end of the day, code controls. Code is what we have to follow. We try to follow both, but when push comes to shove, hopefully they're consistent with each other. So you can say we're enforcing both of them. But code is the thing that we would have to defend in court.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Roddams.
Okay. Any further questions before I go into public hearing? Okay. So let's open the public hearing. I don't know if we have any.
You have one in front of you. You have one.
Mayor, there's one by the side, your side.
Okay. So we'll start. And I do see your hand raised, so we'll get to you in a minute here. Ms. Jacksonheim? I hope, did I pronounce that correctly, ma'am? All right, thank you.
You're doing great,
Can
Mayor.
you state your name and address, please, for the record, and then.
Jean Jacksonheim, 8550 West Atwater Drive, Garden City. I know I only have 3 minutes, and I'm going to tell you that I'm kind of confused by a lot of this. So I may be like Captain Kangaroo and jumping all over the place, and I may say something and you'll go, no, that's not what we're even talking about tonight. But I have a couple of things, and I started with 1051-24. I just have some concerns about the neighborhood meeting process. I see a couple places in here where the only way you have standing to appeal a decision is if you make written comments within 17 days of a neighborhood meeting. However, there is no final application to comment on. I mean, I guess I'm not sure if there's going to be a public hearing later on and another opportunity to comment, but the way I kind of read that is that it's one and done. And if you don't say your piece within 17 days, that you don't have standing later on. And I guess I have some concerns about that, because a lot of times what you see at the neighborhood meeting is nothing like what ends up getting approved or even the final application. So I'm a little concerned about tying my appeal rights to a nebulous, a sort of a like, hello, I'd like to show you my drawings. And that's one concern I have. I will say that I just want to make sure that people have an opportunity to comment. I think it would be, Ms. Thornborough, I will hope will not kill me. I would really like to see a planning staff person at these neighborhood meetings to make sure that the applicant is following the rules about describing the process and what happens and the appeal process and all the things you have written in there that the applicant is supposed to tell the neighbors. But there's no mechanism to verify that's done other than the applicant saying I did it. And I do think that it would be helpful. I don't know how many you have of the neighborhood meetings in a year, but it would sure be helpful to have somebody with some superior knowledge of the land development regulations at the neighborhood meeting, I think. On page 167, the red 167 is, I assume, your packet page numbers. I don't see any grounds for reconsideration. And I think it would be really nice to put in there, what are the grounds for reconsideration? Is it like, qu'est-ce que je pense aujourd'hui? Or is it, I like this person or I don't like this person? I mean, I don't know what the grounds are for that. And I think in order to provide certainty to the applicants, it would be, and anybody who wants to appeal, it would be really helpful to have some grounds specified in there. If it's only for error, then that I think it should say that. Let's see. I would like to move to 1051-26, and here I have just a couple of things. On page 61, the red number 61, I see item 11C, it says failure to notify, that it doesn't invalidate the action even if the notification process is not complied with. And I have a problem with that. I'm a process person, and I think that the rules should be specified and people should follow the rules. And I think that we've run into problems in the past in Garden City when things weren't noticed properly, and things got passed without maybe the neighbors knowing about it because there was not maybe the correct notice. I know that's probably something that would be up for debate, but I do think it's important for everyone to comply with the notice requirements. And then let's see. And I guess the last thing I would say is on page 35, and this also gets to the comment and the question about scale and intensity. The city has a pending zoning ordinance change that will set some sideboards for transition neighborhoods. And that has not gone through the entire process and has not been approved yet. And it has not been applied to any neighborhoods where it might be appropriate. I think if you take out the word scale and intensity at this time, I think it's premature. I think there's no way to protect an existing neighborhood from a development that is too intense if you take that language out. I read through the comprehensive plan again this afternoon, and I really didn't see anything in there that protects the existing neighborhoods. And I realize that the comp plan is not code, but I would certainly think it's appropriate for the council to take into account the existing neighborhoods, even if they are outdated or old-fashioned or whatever. But maybe people like them that way, and I just think it's nice for I think it's nice for the council to keep that language in there so that we can so that we have something to fall back on until that zoning ordinance, that transition zone gets passed, and maybe even beyond. So at this point, I just would like to say thank you. I found this to be an exercise it was a brain exercise for me. I hope that this is going to ultimately end up making things easier for people, because I think once you have very clear rules that people can follow, that there won't be maybe as many delays in getting things through the process. And if the rules are consistently applied for all the applicants, then they'll know what to expect, and it will hopefully save time for staff and the council as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Very well articulated, Ms. Jackson-Heim. Thank you. Ms. Ball, would you like to comment? I know you had your hand up.
Yes, please. Hannah Ball, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City, Idaho. And Miss Jackson was correct. This is definitely a brain exercise. So this one is quite technical. And so I appreciate Charlie for trying to break it down. I would just like to bring up a kind of an additional points to some of Miss Jackson's comments. I took notes as she was speaking, and I really understood she wants people and developers, builders, to comply with the law, to comply with the set of standards. As soon as we go in and we have conversations with staff, we should know what those standards are. And so that's definitely understandable. Um, so a couple points I'd like to bring up is I agree with Mr. Wadham's standard of review and that free review process. I think that's smooth and it creates less conflict. I also would agree that if this could be a continued item, I think it would help smooth a lot of this out. And then Councilmember Jorgensen brought up a really valid point, and she said the comprehensive plan, there is nothing to enforce. It's a vision, and it's a future vision and a goal and a dream that we all have. But developers have to understand what that rule and regulation is. So, to Council Member Kent Rasmussen's point, could we have something that's cleaner, simpler, and actually have more teeth in it? I think that would be the best hybrid solution. So, is it possible, and maybe Charlie can speak to this, is it possible to not have language pointing back to the comprehensive plan because it's vague, but could we have language that points back to sections of code, or could uh, the findings of fact be sort of cleaner? I don't know if there's a law or something that has been deliberated to make the findings of fact and conclusion of law very matter of fact, but that reflect code and the goals of the comprehensive plan without directly saying, look to the comprehensive plan, because then that's vague. And that's where I think the conflict is happening. That was a lot I threw at you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ball. Anybody else would like to speak? Public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, per our earlier discussion, we'll keep that open, and then we'll open deliberations with council. So, Councilor Page.
Yeah, I would just like to mention or just make a note on the record that Mr. Taunton was previously on, presumably to provide input, and I don't see him up there now. So hopefully we are. Is the room able? Are people still able to join?
Mayor, Council President Page, I did notice that, yes, the answer is people are able to join. I had noticed that perhaps he thought the error was on his end and he had bumped off much earlier.
I don't know if anybody wants to text him. Good.
And Mayor,
I'm typically fond of his input.
I just wanted to note that as standard, I would come back for rebuttal, and I'm happy to do so.
Okay.
If
Oh, yes. Okay. Yep. Director Thornborough.
Mayor, members of the council, I don't have much to note. There are grounds for reconsideration in this current draft. You can find them on page 51. They're the same as the appeal, considering a free re-review. I did want to note to Ms. Jackson-Himes' testimony that in the design process, just how it works right now is an applicant would need to make standing somehow with the city. So submit something to the city. And then even if there are changes, they would have the ability to appeal the decision of the design review. And the way that this code is constructed, unless it's triggered to go to a public hearing, design review decision would be final unless appealed. And then there are criteria for triggering a public hearing. And so that right now would require that somebody submit something to the city instead of, there needs to be something instead, because there isn't that necessarily a public hearing in place. The failure to notify, that's something that's been in code for a long time. We're pretty strict about that. If a date's wrong, if the property wasn't posted, if the radius went out a day late, We do put a pause on those public hearings. Really, where I believe that failure to notify is, we hear it all the time. And almost every public hearing, it's, well, I didn't get noticed. And we can go through and go, well, your name's on the list. We don't know what happened once we mailed those mailings. And so that failure to notify is trying to give a little bit of a leeway to the process when things that are outside of our knowledge or control have occurred. Again, if somebody doesn't post property, if the 300 radius doesn't go out, there's a wrong date, incorrect information. We have seen a lot of renoticing and a lot of pauses on applications in my tenure based on noticing. And then just if you need for reference, that scale and intensity compliance with the neighborhood finding is on page 69. It's number 4 and it's highlighted in blue. And understandably, I can understand why the public would like staff present at neighborhood meetings. The way that neighborhood meetings are constructed are for the applicant to have a dialogue with the community that's coming to hear from them. One of the changes that's been made in the resolution that we're going to speak about a little bit later on in amending it is that staff is providing required templates for individuals to provide at their neighborhood meeting to help direct individuals. Having staff attend an additional 30 meetings in the evening when staff's already attending planning and zoning, city council, parks, I would suggest is pretty arduous on the staffing levels that you currently have in development services. And with that, I stand for questions.
Questions for Director Thornborough?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Jorgensen?
Ms. Thornborough, who's the template provided to for the neighborhood meetings, in what format?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, it's provided to the applicants, and they're required to send those out to the 300, a list of 300 people surrounding the property for that neighborhood meeting.
But there's no mechanism to verify that that's been completed. We're on a trust model at this point. If the applicant says, hey, I sent it out and this is what it looked like, we're like, okay, good. We're not verifying with any neighborhood attendees.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, that is correct. They provide the list that they sent it to and what the letter was and a sign-in sheet.
Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page?
Director Thornborough, with to Councilmember Jorgensen's concern, would it be financially burdensome or impossible in your experience as a development services director? Do other jurisdictions require certified mail or something, where there is actual proof positive you can point to that these notices went out?
Mayor, Council President Page, we used to do it in-house. And when this process changed a few years back, prior to what we're speaking about going through tonight, the city did do that. And as an efficiency for the city, it was decided that the applicant could do it. You could certainly do a certified letter. That starts being expensive if you're doing $8 a letter or whatever to 200, close to 200 individuals. And so that certainly could be something that the city requested, but there is that expense to it. The city is going through a noticing process as the applicant right now, where we are used to the cost with the legal notices, the 300-foot notices. We used to have to do some certified letters, but the signage alone for 4 signs, the quotes that we were getting back from 4 or 5 different sign agencies was close to $3,000. And so if an applicant is required to do 4 or 5 different signs for their different meetings, certify the letters each time, it is a consideration on the cost to the applicant.
One thought is require them to bring all of their stamped envelopes to the city, and then we put them in our mailbox. So that's
Or
an
talk
idea,
it back to
right?
the staff.
So they do all the work, we certify it, we see the bundle, we put it in our mailbox, there's your proof. So just a thought.
great
Mr.
idea.
Mayor. Apologies, President.
No apologies.
Councilor Johnson?
Director Thornborough, similar but a little less intense is, do we require a copy to be sent to the city?
Mayor, Council Member Jorgensen, we do not. And that's a pretty easy switch.
And a follow-up, how burdensome would it be to do a random audit? So for instance, on a sign-on sheet, Marjorie is on there and you call her email and say, I want to confirm you received, and show an attachment of that notice. Is that too burdensome?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, we certainly could do random audits. A lot of times the neighborhood meeting, they come back blank. A lot of people don't show up to these neighborhood meetings, even when the city has them. Sometimes the room's full, but I've gone through so many neighborhood meetings myself where it's just passing the time until my time's up and I can go home. So.
Continue.
Thank you. Director, how we hear oftentimes that to Miss Jackson-Heim's comment that what happens in those neighborhood conversations is wildly different than what ends up coming in front of the council. And we hear people coming into public testimony saying they didn't even talk about XYZ. And I understand there is no way to cover all the scope, and the development obviously morphs through the process. Is there any triggers if there's a major change between neighborhood meeting and scheduled to be in front of P&Z or council? Is there anything that ever triggers, hey, you need to renote or send out an update to the neighborhood? Is there anything in an application, if it changes so much, it's like, okay, we're going to allow this application to continue, but it's substantially modified in XYZ, you need to at least follow up with those that you provided original notice to?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, there's not if something looked like a wholly different application, we would certainly require something like that. As people, if they write in to the city and say they're interested, then we would notify the interested parties. But if there's been, and that also acts as that ability to appeal, that standing component. In this discussion, I think probably the easiest, there is a time constraint, but would be to have the city maybe send out a 300-foot notice with the city's process. Obviously, the applicant can change things completely before they apply to the city, based hypothetically, hopefully based on input from the neighborhood meeting. But we wouldn't know that unless we get what they're presenting to the community at that point in time.
Thank you. With your indulgence, I did want to tease a little bit more out of you regarding the language citing the comp plan. I would like your professional opinion. You cited the years that you've served this city and worked through different applications. What do you typically, and I also want to preface that this council has, and with all of your efforts and staff efforts, tried to bring our code in alignment with the comp plan. So there's reducing the conflict. Based on your experience, do you believe that the conflict between code and comp plan has been reduced enough that this language would work? Because I will say I am somewhat concerned about pulling scale and intensity.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen certainly could leave scale intensity as identified in the comprehensive plan. During my tenure, I think more often than not, we see applications in areas that are changing. And so if we go to the waterfront district, it's been a while, but I think it's a safe one to talk about. At that time, there was testimony against the waterfront district because people could not visualize such a large change. And that change did dramatically change the way that the neighborhood felt. And if the decision had been tied to the current state of the neighborhood, where that was a meat packing plant, you certainly could not have gotten the waterfront district starting with the current neighborhood. And so that's staff's concern with not tying it to that future vision, that it may stymie the ability for neighborhoods to redevelop along the lines that the comprehensive plan envisions, because they're dealing with neighbors that may be in a state that the city's trying to move beyond.
Do you think that there's anything in this proposal that would compromise existing neighborhoods? Is there anything that takes away the privilege of the council or P&Z to protect existing neighborhoods?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I would hope that those existing neighborhoods are in compliance enough with the comprehensive plan that the council could protect them. I do understand where that may feel uneasy because if the comprehensive plan may be more vague than saying, look at our entire neighborhood, this is the condition of our entire neighborhood, because the comprehensive plan is a couple of paragraphs or a document versus somebody out and going through and identifying raw data on the neighborhood. So I do understand that concern, but I would hope that that neighborhood aligns with the comprehensive plan if that is something that the city is preserving.
And Director Thornborough, to Ms. Ball's comments, would you agree that it is easier for applicants and developers to work off of code versus the comp plan as a reference and a guideline and requirement for their development?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, in general, the comprehensive plan for the Idaho Supreme Court it's aspirational in nature, and your comp plan, every comp plan, most comp plans have aspirational language, whereas code tends to be very objective. And the more that we work on our code, that's one of our big goals every time we look at a section of code. And so that objectivity is there, but we don't have neighborhoods defined in our code right now. It's we look to the comp plan to say, this is what these neighborhoods should look like.
Apologize for monopolizing this a little bit.
Proceed.
Do other cities define in their code neighborhoods?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I don't want to say straight yes or no.
I'm sure there are. Are there any in the Treasure Valley? I mean, that you're aware of?
I'm going to point to Boise's code right now. It's more form-based in nature, and so I don't know that it defines a neighborhood, but our code is kind of a hybrid between. We have a lot of form-based code within our code, which helps start to define those neighborhoods through height and setback and uses that are allowed. But Boise's might go a little bit further than ours, because it has diagrams and whatnot of what those forms can look like.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Councilmember?
So, first of all, thank you very much, Director Thornborough, for the time that you spent with me today. And, I did really provide kind of a little bit of mix of probably the old editor and me and a few changes, as well as discussing some of the substantial ones of which you brought up. So I appreciate that. The one thing I think, as it relates to the scale and intensity, I think when we talk about the comprehensive plan, it is truly the aspirational document. And I think that that's certainly the position I have always known, and that the code is what is the true law of what is legally binding. I think the challenge that we have, at least within the medium density neighborhood within the city, is we're currently in a holding pattern on the medium density rezoning that's on, waiting for us to complete that. And I think what my concern was, and what I think that I was hearing from Ms. Jackson-Heim, is this concern about until that the rezoning can actually be completed, which does put in a height restriction, which seems to be the biggest thing that can control scale, at least. Until that can be completed, this is the only thing at this point that these neighborhoods can really look to. So I think, I do agree that there's subjectivity in this, and I do question the wisdom of referring to the comprehensive plan when we may know that the comprehensive plan is not the legally binding component when it comes to land use decisions, and where it's important to make sure that our code is reflective. If the comp plan says we want this, we want to provide the right scale and intensity in a particular neighborhood, then the code should be written in a way that supports that. And I believe that that's the intent of the direction we're headed with the medium density designation. Would you agree with that?
Mayor, Council Member Carver Herbert, I guess trying to be careful too, because I don't want to talk about any pending applications. So I will go to the zoning ordinance that's on the books, may not be applied to properties yet. There is a further refinement of what that neighborhood should look like.
Right. Let's check out said property. There's all kinds of property all around it that are waiting to be rezoned, as opposed to what's been based on what's actually on the record and out there and available. We just have not yet moved forward in taking that action. And part of the intent of that was to help provide clarity of what the comprehensive plan really does design, what defines medium density. I mean, there is a definition within the comprehensive plan about what medium density is, and there's a definition of what low density is. So those definitions I find to be helpful and have been brought forward on numerous occasions in testimony to try to give the context of what that neighborhood should be. But what we are lacking is the ability within our actual code to fulfill what those definitions are bringing forward. So my question is, my sense is there's probably comfort in being able to let go of this language, this aspirational language about the comprehensive plan, if we felt that our code was really where it should be. And I think from my level of understanding and comfort is I don't believe the code is yet supporting of that, at least in the neighborhood that is defined as medium density.
Mayor, Councilmember Herbert, if I may. Currently, code for residential districts has established a link to the comprehensive plan where they will say this zoning designation is intended to implement this comprehensive plan designation. I can bring it up for reference, but there is that link now saying what is this zoning code trying to do, and then there will be a link to the comp plan designation. And so trying to be very careful, but the RM designation, for example, links to the residential medium density district within the comprehensive plan. And so they talk to each other in a way. So I think that there may be a couple of options if you're not comfortable with that comprehensive plan language. Perhaps that neighborhood is this would not achieve what I think you're hoping to achieve. It would do the opposite. But what is requested within that zoning district then ties back to the uses and whatnot that are identified in code. But you could tie it back to code that way instead of keeping it stagnant with the potential to not allow for a neighborhood to change.
So I'll have more for deliberation, but I think in terms of question, that I appreciate that. I think the only other component, if you wouldn't mind providing some explanation, because I did bring this up in our conversation, was this, but my concern was it had to do with the, on the failure to notice on page 61 is this, provided the spirit of the procedure is observed. And because part of state law in the LUPA code, it says shall on several of these instances. I believe it's the legal notice. I believe it's the press release, and there may have been one or two other things. So my concern was, if state law is requiring that, why do we have this little designation that said, provided the spirit of the procedure is observed?
Mayor, Councilmember Carver Herbert, this is old code, not proposed code. It's been in code for a long time. But how it is treated internally, and certainly additional language and clarification could be added. But it's treated as a shall. You shall meet the timeframes. You shall do the required posting. You shall. But it's more of those one-offs where somebody comes and testifies and said, I didn't get it. You have a noticing error. And we can go through the list and say, you're on the list. But we don't know what happened between putting the mail out for the mail service and the hearing. That individual, maybe their mail went to their neighbors, maybe whatever happened. And so that's how that clause has been treated since I've dealt with it. But it is old code, so we're familiar with how we interact with it. Certainly there's room to add clarification buffers, side rails to that language.
Okay, thank you. I would be something that I would look to, and I think also maybe to ask Mr. Wadhams at some point to maybe have, if he has an opinion on that. I understand the flexibility. We don't control whether the U.S. Post Office delivers something or not. And so I get that part. I just would hate for it to be misused. Well, I did this, and so I intended to do, or even in the city could be in the situation where the city did something or maybe didn't, or missed a deadline by maybe a day, So I think if we're going to say these are the things we won't give on, they have to meet the deadlines, or whatever we should choose to be, that maybe it should be clarified. Okay, you mentioned the fact that I think maybe further definitions of good cause and standing in your comments. Those were some things that came up in questions that I had. And I think that pretty much covers things that we had conversation about today. So I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember?
I do have a question for Mr. Wadhams. If
Well, so are these deliberations, or are we just?
This is a question.
Okay.
As long as, did anybody else have questions for Director Trump? I don't want to. Mr. Wadhams?
Councilmember.
On page 167, I am concerned about the call out regarding creating grounds for reconsideration. I was removing. This is a lot of strikeouts. It doesn't appear that a lot of that actually defines grounds for reconsideration. Have we lost that language, or is it, or would you point me in another location?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, some of that is covered in the resolution, the proposed resolution that comes up after this 1051-26. So some of that is covered in resolution, and then we just get that stuff. Let me make sure I have it. There we go. That would be proposed resolution 1245-26. That is agenda item G6. And so some of that's covered under the resolution. However, I think some of that stuff should be in the ordinance as well. So what we've tried to do, and there's a sweet spot somewhere, but we've tried to take stuff that's not required to be in code and put it in resolution, because resolutions are easier to change because you don't have three readings. You don't have to have a legal notice and things like that. However, there's still some things that the code should and the ordinance should say about requests for reconsideration. So that's kind of a question about what the council's comfort level is. Would you like those regulations in the ordinance, which is harder to amend, or would you like it in the resolution, which is easier to amend? And I think there should be, I think it should be probably be in both with more specificity in the resolution. That answers your question.
Thank you. It does.
Any
Thank you,
further
Mr.
questions? Okay, let's remember the public hearing is still open. So, and my guess is based on all the questions we've heard and Mr. Wadham's recommendation. We'll keep that open. But let's open for deliberations. Councilmember Page, you'd like to start us off?
Sure. Here's some of my thoughts. I disagree with the note to the reader that substituting scale and intensity with conforming to the comprehensive plan is reductive of subjectivity. In my view, the opposite is the case. Scale and intensity, when I'm thinking about a neighborhood, I have a vision of what those two things mean, versus in conformity with the comprehensive plan, that's a needle in a haystack statement. I'm really, I find that to be pretty subjective. If a person comes up and testifies and they say, well, this just isn't in conformity with the comprehensive plan, my question to them is, well, in what way? Whereas scale, that means something to me, and intensity, that means something to me too. So I prefer that language myself. I want to talk a little bit about the and this is interesting because we're lumping this agenda up a little bit, and so I want to talk about the standard of review. There was a question about whether the review should be of the record or on new evidence with new evidence provided. Personally, I prefer standards to be on the record because new evidence comes in and changes, just like a development plan seems to morph and change over time. And in my mind, that creates a hard moving target. And I don't want to talk about a open project. However, in a recent meeting, I had strong opinions about that. And that's the reason why I prefer a record that I can refer to, read, be prepared for council meeting. And if it feels to me a little bit like a rug pull, if new information comes in at the last minute, right? New testimony. Well, we've changed this up because of this or that. Well, that's not what was voted on. What was voted on was this other thing. And so I prefer reviews on the record. So that's my preference, and that's why.
So to clarify, Councilmember Page, so I want to make sure we're distinguishing between an appeal, which is what this 1051-26 is, which is you're looking at a decision by P and Z or the other decision maker versus a reconsideration, which we'll get into in the item 6, which is reconsideration is someone is asking for reconsideration of a council decision. So do you differentiate, keep those differentiated, or are you speaking the same for both?
I don't at all. If it's a motion to reconsider, I want it to be based on error, that we made clear error.
So I just want to clarify.
And on an appeal, same. Let's commit to the things that we're going to build and our application. And as a council, we'll commit to supporting those that we approve. But I don't like the idea of changing things.
So if I'm clarifying, so I gave the example of the cell tower, for instance, or we had a recent application where we pointed at the comprehensive plan and we made an objective statement of why, that was done. So in that case, are you leaving all decisions by P and Z as final? So if you find no error in what they did, then we're not going to relook at that record regardless of any nuance or examples that I gave. I just want to make sure so we understand where that goes, right? So I just want to clarify your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of reversing the Planning and Zoning Commission unless there's error made. That's my view. I realize that I'm elected and they're appointed, and so that's the perhaps the biggest tension. But if we can't find error that was wrong, then it comes down to things that are pretty subjective. I don't want to give specifics, but I was on planning and zoning, and not as long as Ken. And a lot of times I felt like we made very reasoned decisions with a lot of evidence, and there was public hearing, and there was pages and pages and pages of prep for that. It wasn't made in a whimsical fashion. And then when it was reversed, which is fine, and within the purview of the city council, I would ask a council member, hey, why? And the answer I got was offensive. It was, well, just you made a mistake. We'll point to it.
And I think per Mr. Wadham's guidance that he's always given, so if we have free review, for instance, and you do think that there was nuances to the decision that needed to be made, you still have to make a very clear objective statement if you're gonna change the decision of P&Z. You can't just say, well, it's this, right? And so I think one thing we've really tried to do as a city is any decision we make, there has to be a very clear objective statement, or you just can't do it, right? And so if it's not clearly articulated, and we've been able to do that with maybe issues like health and safety or whatever, right? But they have to be very clear. I just want to make sure that council is okay relinquishing that authority of not having that free review. And so I just want to make sure that's very clear. Versus
these are my opinions.
No, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. You're not in favor of the free review that is in the ordinance.
I enjoyed knowing what exactly is being pointed to as an error, and being able to address that without new evidence coming into a record or new changes coming to a application. Right? Because then it's a different application, and in the example of the neighborhood meeting, well, now suddenly we're hearing something different, and a person who didn't think they really wanted to testify about that didn't come to meetings, and then something that isn't what they envisioned at the neighborhood meeting is built. And so I like this idea of our reviews being pretty structured, pretty firm.
Okay.
I prefer that.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, I hate to interrupt the deliberation and thank you for this. I'm assuming that this deliberation is going to feed into our rewrite. And so I'm hoping to ask Council President Page a clarification on his thoughts. Right now, there's also council level reviews that we do. And that's a review of anything that is done by another, any final decision, either at P&Z or by, well, sometimes staff if it's a design review. And I'm just curious if that point of view extends, that abuse of discretion point of view extends to those reviews as well, just as a clarification as we go through.
I believe that the pulling something off of the notice of decisions, is that what you're referring to?
Mayor, Council President Page, that's correct.
I believe the standard there is clear harm.
Thank you.
So I can articulate, if I'm going to pull something off of that, I'm going to say why there's harm to the city, and that will trigger, additional hearings, whatever it triggers, right? Reopening of, but that's the standard that I would point to, right? It's not just because I don't like something, or in some cases where I, in my time with the city, have seen, well, we just didn't like it. But is that clear harm? That's the standard.
Mr. Mayor, Council President, if I could just chime in on that a little bit, because that is one issue, and it's we've been talking about appeals and we've been talking about requests for reconsideration, but we have not yet talked about what the standard of review should be when you pull something off the consent, and that is on page 89 of your packet, or page 2 of the ordinance. And one of the things that I just saw at some point in time, they struck out a finding that there needs to be adverse impact. I would recommend you put that back in, because to Council President's point, there has to be some finding on why to take something off the consent agenda, or else it's totally subjective. So maybe I'm misreading that. And then, but the question is the standard of review. Should that be the same on reviews as appeals as well? That would help us.
I apologize and should make a record of this. I misquoted that standard. Thank you.
Yeah, there may be a significant adverse impact, I think is what, and that is wording that the Idaho Supreme Court has said is fine. So we can defend that wording out there. And that's page 89 of the packet, or page 2 of the ordinance.
Good point. Yeah.
To the idea of sometimes we see established neighborhoods, voters who have a voice, they have standing, they put us in office, they are passionate about a project that might come to their neighborhood, and they show up and say intelligent things and have great input. To those kinds of comments, I want to be able to support them. That's what my role is as a council member that's voted in by people that live in neighborhoods that want to speak about that. But we should know that the name of Development Services, the Development Services Department, is Development Services. It is not Neighborhood Retention Services, or the Department of Never Gonna Change, right? I mean, those are the kinds of things that, and I love the director's comment about the meatpacking plant, right? Well, that was the neighborhood, and so our homes in compliance with what was already there? No, but does the comprehensive plan have a higher vision for properties along the river than meatpacking plants and blood ponds. I think it does, right? So that's kind of my general view, and take that how you wish. But we are in the business of helping our city to redevelop and improve its image, and that doesn't happen if we don't facilitate that. And that's what our director's charter is to facilitate that change and that development in an effective way. And as far as the council, our job is to put guardrails on and make sure that the voice of our constituents is contemplated in these deliberations, because that's the voice that they have is really us. Because neighborhood meetings, they're fine, and that's a great part of noticing, but that's not, decisions aren't made at neighborhood meetings. So I just want to make sure I'm covering everything here. For standing, why, Mr. Wadhams, for standing, why do we have to have complex triggers?
Mayor, council president, you do not need complex triggers. This should be relatively easy. I mean, define what standing is and follow that. I can provide standing means you're either, so it should, mayor, council president, it should be simple with a simple definition.
In the Supreme Court cases, I'm familiar with some where standing was the issue. The Supremes said, well, anybody who ever set foot in a park, a national park, had standing because they used that park. They didn't have to live there. They didn't have to attend a meeting. They didn't have to engage in a specific way. With Garden City, I feel like if you live in a radius of a project, you have standing. Or if you work within a radius of a project, you have standing. Or in my mind, that's how it is. If you have a business within that radius of impact, you should have standing. And tying standing to, hey, well, did you attend a meeting, or did you write a letter or something? I feel like that's a barrier to voices being heard. And I think we should support voices being heard. And in the spirit of our new mayor, say yes more than no. So for standing, we should be liberal about people having standing, I feel. Can I think of examples that are the opposite? Yes. When I was on planning and zoning, there was a cell tower that was proposed, and it fit our zone, and it was proper, and the recommendations were that we allowed it. And we had many people that lived outside of Garden City who lived on the bench, who felt that tower would impede their view. Do they have standing? They don't put me in office, right? I can't convey their voice. It's been well established that view is not something that, you don't have a legitimate encroachment on view. I'm sorry.
No, I got you into people's private spaces.
Yes. So I am of the opinion that standing should be a liberal construct. And those were the comments I've made notes on here. I really want to thank Miss Jeannie Jackson-Hine, Miss Hannah Ball for their thoughts on language that's vague versus language that's specific. And that really channeled what I was thinking when I read through this. Oh, there is one other question I had, and this is a question, this is not a comment. On page 19. That's not bad. Excuse me while I find this really quick. I apologize. I'll come back to it. Please don't wait for me. Someone else.
Very well articulated. Thank you, Councilmember Page.
Want me to go ahead?
Rasmussen.
Yeah, thank you. I am not going to have a whole lot more to add because I agree a lot with Council President Pages. So I'll start with the standard of review. And again, I do agree that it should be in those appeal cases, non de novo, and we're just there to correct errors. I did a lot of thinking yesterday as I was reviewing all the information about the free review. And as I think of the whole concept of an appeal and our role in that, it seems that in knowing, I should say, what a planning and zoning commission and all the information that is handed to those folks and all the considerations and all the public testimony that goes into a planning and zoning decision-making process. There's a lot there for that. Everything happens in a planning and zoning meeting that's relevant to all the information that was supplied to them. So I guess all I'm just trying to say is they do a lot of work, and I think it's up to us to act as an appellant body to when that happens to view it that way only, to find an error.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I can't think of anything else I would add to the council president's comments on some of the other issues that are out there, or some of the other things that we talked about, except I would agree with those. So, but I did want to make clear how I felt about the standard of review. So I'll hand it over to the next council member.
So obviously, thank you to the members of the community that have provided their input, observations, comments, and suggestions. We clearly do take that very seriously. And that is really where the rubber hits the road, in my opinion. So with all respect, true, sincere respect for the president of the council and my fellow council members, I have a tremendous amount of respect for P&Z. I can't imagine being in that role because it is a lot of details, and I truly do appreciate the effort, the time, and all of the recommendations that they forward. However, ultimately, it is not a knock against their efforts or their intelligence or the process. When an applicant gets in front of the council, their trust and our constituency trust that we ultimately do what is the best for the city. And so ultimately, if this council sees something, hears something that complies with code or that needs to be allowed to be reconsidered or appealed, that, in my opinion, should be reserved for the council. Mayor's, example of a new P&Z panel that may miss something that we with your vast experience, it gets here and you're like, that was clear oversight. I would depend on those with experience to call that forward. Likewise, if there's something that gets to this level and we look at it and we say this applicant did the best with the information that they were provided and P&Z did their best and we appreciate their recommendation, but I still see something that would benefit this city, and I am working within code and the requirements that our council provides. I think that we should have that free review. Further, I think that there's a consideration of efficiency. We want, I believe, first and foremost in my world is we do what's best for the city for our residents. Next is we've heard from those that try to do business within our city, you're difficult to do business with. So if we as a council can see an avenue to improve the efficiency and allow things that allow reconsideration or an appeal that will help expedite an end result that is the best for the city, I think, again, the council should have that right and be able to act on that versus being strapped by language that is very finite and very clear. I understand why that's needed and I understand why that helps, but I also believe that there has to be a reasonable, practical approach that allows reasonable people who have been elected to say, in the best interest of the city or in the interest of efficiency, I believe we should allow this reconsideration or this appeal. So that is why you will see if this council has heard an applicant and says, we have these concerns, this issue, that issue, the applicant comes back and says, gosh, we heard you, we did this, rather than calling him on the carpet and saying, where's the deficiency in our decision? Set our ego aside and say, what is best for the city? And that's how I look at it. I don't think that it is you missed something, you screwed it up. It is hey, can you help us get to the best solution as fast as possible? And that is why I think I prefer and endorse the free review approach. Regarding the standing, I am 1,000% behind. Well, you can't be more than 100%, but I do like the idea of a liberal standard. So the president of the council's comment, though, we've had people come here and testify in public hearings that aren't residents of the city, aren't business people, but they like to use the resources within the city. I just inherently discount their input when compared against those residents or businesses within the city. So I think there's a natural ability to kind of vet some of that. I appreciate obviously the input regarding, and I have heard multiple comments regarding public testimony notification and the disparate way that it starts at neighborhood meetings. The neighborhoods hear one thing or are very frustrated by those neighborhood meetings. So I would at minimum recommend that it be a requirement that whatever an applicant sends out, they send a copy to the city. And I would like to see an audit of those neighborhood meetings to confirm that what we believe is being talked about is in fact making it to the consumer, the end user. I also am in alignment with the president of the council regarding the language of scale and intensity. I think there's a little bit more clarity and it is easier to define and point to scale and intensity as a topic versus a comprehensive plan, which encompasses so much information. And I believe that is the scope of my comments and observations.
Great. Well, thank you. Also very well articulated.
Okay.
Council member?
So thank you to each of my colleagues because I think over the last few days, I've actually found myself on both sides of the fence, I think, from time to time. by nature, I am a rules-based person. I like to work within the rules. If I know what the rules are, I usually operate pretty clearly. And the one thing that I've heard, I think, at least from the small group of people over the years, whether it be those that are trying to develop something in the city or even those that are within the neighborhoods, that when people have a clear idea of what the city expects, they can try to work well within that. I've also believe that I've actually witnessed myself and have heard feedback that at times there have been the perceptions that there have been decisions in the past that perhaps have been perceived as, and I will not make any accusations that they were, but at least perceived that perhaps may have been not as fair or as clear, or why would one application be able to be approved and yet you see another that is not? And I think the only way to try to resolve that is by having these clear standards, that everyone is working from the same page and having an understanding. I think what gives me, which would mean that I'm much more in the category of the more of the, what do we call that standard that you're referring to?
Well, I misquoted it.
Okay, but rather than the free review, the opposite.
Abuse of discretion.
The use of discretion.
Deference.
Detriment and abuse of discretion, detrimental. My concern with that is I also see very really the consequences of what can happen when there are probably also many examples of something that could get approved in our city. And if we just choose to stay well within that realm, that we have to feel okay as a council to let those things go, knowing that we can see maybe there are problems, maybe we might even be able to find a matter of code that might be wrong with it, or maybe at the end of the day, we just simply don't care for it. And when we move to a position of no free review, we basically are saying we're okay, that we just have to trust the process. We have to trust the fact that our code is where we want it to be, that our comprehensive plan is certainly clear and provides the vision that we want our city to be. And then again, that the code supports building out that vision. And that we also trust the people, our staff, who has extensive knowledge and experience and being in the trenches, as well as our P&Z, who spend an enormous amount of time preparing and doing their jobs. And this is not a decision that I make easily. And so what I had to tell myself at the end of the day, okay, what is kind of my gut feel? And that is being more on more rules-based approach rather than the free review. And I would say I do it with a great deal of trepidation, because it does mean there are times that maybe we may see things as a council and may see things differently. And that unless we are able to meet that standard, that we don't have a lot of flexibility to do that. But I'd have to say, I just have to, at this point, be able to go back to, I think, where I tend to operate. And as I said, I tend to be more of a rules-based person and operate pretty well within that. And so that's where I come out on that particular standard. With regard to the standing, I appreciate the conversation around that, because I think my questions came up more along the lines of what is our definition, because I do, as the council president Page has said, have known of court cases that have been essentially thrown out as a result of the individuals that have brought that forward as not having standing. And so I think if the folks within the city have an understanding, those who participate in this process understand what standing is, My one clarifying question I have for Mr. Wadhams would be, is it truly us as a city that defines that, or is there any legal? Because I'm thinking about what we might think is okay, but if it should get kicked out into judicial review, how would the courts review that?
Mayor, council member, I would rely on the legal definition. There are legal definitions. I've provided those in legal opinions before. I always say follow the state code, and there are state codes on what standing means, and there's also court interpretation. So I would just recommend we follow what the courts say it is and not deviate from that. And I can provide that for the council for the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of the stuff, Mayor, council member, we should not be recreating the wheel on a lot of the stuff. We should just be applying definitions right out of the Idaho code or the Idaho case law.
Thank you. I also, it came up because there were some good cause are mentioned 2 or 3 times in this ordinance, and I would feel more comfortable if we had some guidelines around what good cause may be. And then I appreciate the ideas and that have come forth from my colleagues about the issue of scale and intensity. Yes, thank you. I obviously am in favor that we can try to get the code to the place that I believe the code should be for the neighborhoods that potentially could be impacted by scale and intensity. If the density is where the vision for that neighborhood should be, and if the heights for the vision of what that neighborhood should be, then we should have the code in place to control that. And maybe we would feel less compelled to feel like we have to have the words as they are listed today. But I definitely am in favor of keeping scale and intensity as it's written today in the ordinance. So I think beyond that, that's where I stand.
Okay. Mr. Wadhams, I had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I want to understand a little bit on the appeal of a potential P&Z decision. So if someone appeals and, obviously they have to find an error. The council would have to find an error in what P&Z deliberated on. Can they appeal a decision based on kind of nuances like it doesn't conform? So it may allow, let's say it's allowed by code, but the scale and intensity comes in and they were very strict on that. Well, it's not in our code. And so, but can someone appeal that decision based on, I don't think it fits the scale and intensity of the project? Or is it, nope, sorry, it's that cut and dry. There's not an error because code doesn't define scale and intensity. And so we're going to have whatever, right? So I just want to understand what the ability of someone, an appellant, I guess, someone making the appeal of what constitutes a correct appeal matter or topic, I guess.
Mayor, on your question, I think that somebody could appeal basically anything they want. If it's determined to be frivolous down the road in an administrative appeal, I don't think there's any penalty. Now in court, if somebody files a frivolous appeal, they could be sanctioned. But in an administrative realm, I think they could appeal anything they want to. Whether this council gives any weight to it, that's a different topic. But they could certainly appeal. But to your point about not having a definition, that's to my point. When we don't know what scale and intensity means, that means we need a definition, and then so everybody knows what scale and intensity means. So when there's some confusion about what terms mean, I always recommend define it. I mean, just define it so everybody knows what it means. Does that help? I mean, I
kind of. So
I mean,
I guess
I think people could appeal procedural issues and substantive issues. So, I mean, if they just think the council made a procedural error, they could appeal. If they think the council or the council planning and zoning, excuse me, But if somebody thinks that planning and zoning made a substantial, substantive mistake, they could appeal that too.
Well, I guess an example of the cell tower, because it's easy. P&Z approves it, follows code, right? They didn't break any code. Can someone then appeal that and say, you know what, it doesn't conform with the neighborhood, it's too tall. It
Yes.
didn't break code, right? I mean, they approved it because of code. And so then can they appeal that? And
Yes.
then based under this definition of, what's it called? Not free review, but
Abusive discretion.
abusive
Or
discretion.
deference to planning.
Are council's hands tied to say, well, yeah, we can't even hear your appeal because they followed code to the word, and they didn't, and so we're not allowed to even hear that because it followed code. So that's kind of my question, is like, at what would allow, is it that firm, is that strict? So if someone appealed that cell tower example because it didn't conform to the neighborhood, it was right outside someone's house, would council say, well, sorry, I didn't see where they found an error in the code, too bad, so sad, that's the way it is, because we're not giving any deference to be able to discuss that. So that's my question. There's a gray area for me, and I just like clarification.
Right. Mayor, if I understand the question, that's really the heart of the question, is if your standard is abuse of discretion, you're going to have to find that they made a mistake. And if you don't think they made a mistake, then the appeal goes away.
So in that example, if they followed code, there's no mistake.
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to even hear the appeal.
Well, but then the
Other
question,
remedies are available, Mr. Mayor.
So yeah, explain to me how that would work. Just educate me on that.
Council President, you want to take it?
Just judicial review.
Judicial review. Okay. And then leave it up to the judge.
But so that's Mayor, if I may, that's the cell tower is a great example, because if people that were around when that happened, that was a conditional use permit, planning and zoning approved it, and then it wasn't appealed. And so then the council created this council review that goes back to you must find there may be a significant adverse impact. So then on those ones, yeah, do you want that to be abuse of discretion, or do you want those ones to be clear review? Because in the context of the cell tower, if it was an abuse of discretion standard, the council would have had to have found that P&Z made a mistake. If it's a free review, just a difference of opinion would be enough to overrule planning and zoning.
And I don't think we get a lot of business done under that.
The cases are rare, right? Because usually the fortunate thing that we've got in this city is we have really good P&Z, and they make really good, thoughtful decisions. And I can't think of too many times when we've overruled them, and very few, if any. But it's just in the event that, I guess, is more of what I'm thinking. So I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I just had a point of clarification that we do have previous versions of the ordinance. They were in the abuse of discretion grounds. And so I pulled those up if they help with the discussion.
All right. Councilmember Jorgens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to, I wanted to circle back a little bit because Councilwoman Carver Herbert is exactly right. In the instance, if you say you have to have a code and comp plan that you have complete confidence in. Well, we don't. Our comp plan, the last time we updated it was in 2019.
Correct.
And we knew 2 years ago we needed to take a look at it. We know that we're currently working on our code and improving that. But I also want to reframe, again, it is not a matter of trust. Like, I absolutely trust our P&Z. I absolutely trust our staff. What I believe we need, I'm very good at what I do. I can make a lot of decisions. I have a very strong staff that will say, I don't like that idea. We think we should do this. I have to give them the latitude to say, okay, let's try that. If there's a good, just cause, it helps improve the efficiency, provides better customer services and the benefit of the customer and the company. Why would I not want that to be allowed? So I think that it's very critical. The other component that our code is going to we are going to have a very difficult time with is we have a disproportionate amount of odd sized lots. And we don't have a 20-mile radius to just develop a bunch of stuff and have it 80-20 rule. The disparate amount of odd sized lots means we're going to have a lot of applications that will come in flagged with a lot of requests for exceptions or whatever the word is, right? And then that creates a bunch of red flags, and everybody's like, well, geez, look at all these exceptions. You know, why would we approve something that is coming in asking for so much consideration on our code? Well, because we have odd sized lots and some weird things in our city, and we don't have boatloads of land to remedy it. So in instances, if an applicant comes in and says, hey, I did my best, and this council says not good enough, and they can immediately come back and say, you didn't make a mistake. You understood the code. P&Z was right, but give me a shot because I figured out a way to work within and fix all the issues you told me you had with the application. I think that falls under free review. And this, again, I would roll back and say in that instance, you're doing our citizens and the applicant a benefit in making it efficient to at least allow that free review. So that again is why I think we need to be pretty aware of the implication if you surrender a free review, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Rasmussen.
Thank you. I really appreciate all my fellow council members' deliberations. I think this conversation has been really good, and I really feel confident that we're going to end up at a place that's going to be really good. But kind of circling back, using your words, I take everything that we do here, that planning and zoning does, that staff does, and that design review does, everything we do here, we do with the belief that our code is written to do what's best for the city. I have that fundamental belief that our code is there to do what's best for all 13,000 of us and the businesses that are here. That doesn't mean we don't tweak it. We don't update it. We do those things to make it even better than it was before. But fundamentally, our code is there to help our city prosper and do all the things we want it to do. Whether it's 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, everything is there to help us be successful and to help our residents be successful. As I say that, though, I also recognize that sometimes a small number of citizens may not agree that some application is good for them or whatever, and I recognize that. But I still kind of go back to the idea that our code is good for the city. And yes, there's always going to be instances, and it's difficult and it's challenging, and to consider those things when we know that there are residents that are unhappy about, maybe approving an application that maybe they don't want to have approved. So the reason I'm saying all this is because I did want to go back and just say that I feel like everything is there that helps us do the right thing. If an error is made, that means that in my brain tells me that somebody did something, an approval was made that's not good for the city. So it's really that simple for me, that we just use the standard of error correction with the fundamental belief that our code is there to do the right thing always. So again, I was thinking about that as I was listening to everybody else offer their thoughts, and that concept I thought was something I thought worth sharing. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any
But
other
you would
comments?
agree that our code has room for improvement.
Yeah, and that's when we do.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about some more tonight, but I would say that, so yes, I would agree. But I would also say that even what's there now that might be improved in the future is still the right thing at the time when it was written.
I would agree, but that is why we're currently ongoing updating Title VIII, right?
That's correct.
Because we know that there's some shortcomings and gaps, and I don't expect we'll remedy that even through this process.
Right.
We're not going to hit it 100%, right?
So code evolves, right?
It
always
does.
has. And so, staff is working on a code revamp that'll probably take some time. And so we've discussed that. When we're ready to present that to council as well. So, okay, any other questions, deliberations?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Page?
Yeah, I want to go to page 53 of the packet. And this is a note to reader box under subsection F.
You said 53?
Yes, I did. Thank you. This note says it's been suggested by legal that this is not necessary. And what it's pointing to is a written decision document consistent with the requirements of Idaho Code Title 67, Chapter 65 shall be provided to the applicant. That language is shall. It is prescriptive. Why wouldn't that be necessary?
Mayor, Council President Page, it's the strike through that further identifies what should be in there. And so my understanding of legal's discussion eons ago was that just point back to state statute requirements versus trying to re-identify in the code what is required. And so certainly staff can make sure that that's in staff reports and in the decision documents, but not having to rehash it.
Thank you. That absolutely makes sense. Appreciate that.
Councilmember Herb?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would have to say that the comments made by Councilmember Jorgensen are very compelling because, as you probably picked up from my very tortured decision, I think that's probably a bit of where the crux for me is. I feel maybe a little less confident in whether our comp plan and our code is where we want to be. Already discussed tonight that we are not where I believe the zoning needs to be in the medium density neighborhoods. And until that is completed, I probably won't rest very well. It opened because of other previous changes to R3 zoning. There are now uses that are allowed within that zoning that may be questionably okay in a medium density residential. But that aside, I also care a great deal about all areas of our city, and I care a great deal about the east side, which is the part of our city that is evolving tremendously. And as I was looking at the comprehensive plan and the zoning map tonight for another item on our agenda tonight, I came up with questions. I'm like, why would we have the zoning be that for this? And I think that's where this opportunity to take a look at our comprehensive plan again and continue to push toward having our code in accordance with that is something is really important to me. And so my concern is if we move to this much more restrictive standard rather than the free review standard, is in this interim until the code gets to the place that we want it to be, am I comfortable with letting things with being so stringent in our viewpoints and our standard of how we would review all decisions in an appeal? And So I have a few more minutes, I think probably, or maybe we don't have to make that. We aren't making that decision tonight. So I guess I may have some more time to really
We are not. No.
determine exactly where I come out on it. But as you said, as you can see, that I am very much understanding both sides of the coin on this. And I understand, the cost to the developers. I understand the frustration of the neighbors. I understand, I see the whole picture, and that's why these decisions tend to be really difficult for all of us.
Very healthy debate, for sure. Okay. Any further deliberations? Okay, so I think the next step, I don't think we're ready, obviously, to approve this ordinance per Mr. Wadham's observations. We knew that kind of going in, given the weight of this. And so we're going to end up passing over 4 and 5 in terms of motion to adopt and motion to approve the decision document. And so just, I want to make sure that we've summed up what we think we need to do. Do you want to give a good summary, Director Thornborough, what you think we need to have ready? And again, request of staff is that we come back and look at this. It'll take them probably about a month. And so not next meeting, but at least one after. So,
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask for a point of order on the standard review issue? I heard a 2-2. Can I get a motion in a second and see if we get a motion that passes on what the standard review should be? And I'm talking about appeals and these council reviews in this code amendment here.
well,
And
let
in
me ask the
consideration.
clerk, does that need to be decided today, or is that, it sounds like a couple of the council members are still mulling it over?
Mayor, council members, we can do a couple different things.
Two decision documents?
I could give you 2 different drafts, and Jen and I could both work on 2 different drafts, and you could look at them side by side if you're not ready to make that decision tonight. But that takes more work for staff, but we're happy to serve.
Are the are the kind of the fundamentals of both documents fairly similar, except for those 2 points?
Some of the definitions will need to be tweaked, but I'm capable.
They'd be the same either way.
Yeah, they'd be similar. Yeah.
So if they're close, and then really we're going to be one of those 2, then with that, I think that's what we should do so that council can thoroughly read both options.
I think Jen and I can make that happen.
All right, Director Thurmar, would you like to summarize what we're going to do the next month?
Mayor, it sounds like you are continuing the public hearing until May 11th,
Yes.
as well as the
Does
third
that give you
reading.
enough time? May 11th? Okay. Till
Thank
May
you.
11th.
And then hopefully I took good notes. Most of the discussion was pretty consistent. I think that we have maybe a table and something that says abuse of discretion versus free review in code. And so we can bring forth 2 different versions. There were 3 items in the packet tonight. I would like to quickly poll and see if you liked all 3 of those items, just kind of the note to reader, the ordinance itself, and then the clean version, or if there's any of that that's just, why do we have this information in our packet? But certainly we can bring all 3 of those frameworks to look at this. It's all the same information, just provided in different formats.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
Dr. Thornborough, so you're asking us, is it really necessary for you to have to provide us those 3 versions in this next round?
And Mayor, Council Member Carver Herbert, yes, I know that the length of the packet can be very long. I printed out this 2-sided, and it's the same information, just posed 3 different ways. If just a copy of the ordinance is what you would like to see, I know in the past I've heard people say, please just give me a clean copy without strike through. And then I've heard other people say, I like those notes to readers and I like the highlight. And so if there is a format that you prefer, all 3, I'm happy to do all 3. But I also don't want to make you read an extra 100 pages unnecessarily.
I like the strike through myself.
Okay.
I do.
Strike through.
I don't necessarily know that you have to provide the clean copy and the other, because you did provide 2 additional copies and the notes to reader. I think the notes to reader were very helpful in this particular round. They may not be quite as necessary in the next round is kind of my point of view, but at least the strike throughs.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does that give you direction?
Mayor, yes, thank you. I have very clear direction, I think.
So do I clarify me on what we need to do, Charlie? We need to
Yes,
make a
Mr. Mayor,
motion?
since, yeah, can we get some motions and and see if we get seconds on, agenda. So one by one, I think would be the cleanest thing. So
two through five, right?
2 through 5. And I would recommend some kind of a motion that would be keeping the public hearing open till May 11th and keeping the deliberation open till May 11th on each one of those items.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page?
I move to keep deliberation and public hearing on ordinance 1051-26 open to a date certain of May 11th, 2026.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Director Thornburg, can you call roll, please?
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
and Council President Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So moving on to 6, are we okay if we take like a 5-minute break?
Mr. Mayor, can we get through ordinance 3 and 4 just while we're here and then take our
I
break?
thought did we?
His motion was just about agenda item 2.
Oh.
So you could have done,
Sorry.
you could have done
I
a consolidate.
Do you want to?
Yeah,
would you like me to consolidate?
Yeah, let's consolidate them.
Okay.
We don't do it for. Sorry.
So, Mr. Mayor, I move to consolidate agenda items 3, 4, 5.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
Into this motion to keep the deliberation and public hearing open to a date certain of May 26th. Excuse me, May 11th.
Have a
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Call roll, please.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Council President Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Thank you for consolidating. With that, we take a 5-minute recess and we'll continue on with item G6, which is the reconsideration resolution. All right, with that, 5 minutes, we'll be back at how much time is that, right? 5 minutes good, or do we want us to go to 8:30?
I'm good with 5. whatever you guys-
All right, 5's fine. Are we on?
We are
Okay,
on.
folks, we're gonna continue our
friends in the Magic Valley.
city council meeting. Next up is item G6, resolution 1245.6. This is the reconsideration. And so the difference is this is a reconsideration for people who want to reconsider a decision that was made by council. And so this resolution is pretty straightforward. It follows state statute. On the reasons for consideration are pretty clear. I think Ms. Thornbow is suggesting a few tweaks, which we'll go over. The only thing I wanted to ask on this is, and this kind of goes to a point that I've made and also Councilmember Jorgensen just made. So, part of what I really want to try to do is, in my 3 points that I've mentioned, is, not be cumbersome to work with as a city, as well as try to say yes more than we say no. The statute's pretty clear on this one. It's like you need to have these points for reconsideration. So one thing I wanted to kind of just discuss, and we don't need to make a decision today, is if we have an applicant, and Councilmember Jorgensen made this example where they've kind of gone through the process and we're looking at probably a denial, but there's things that they can remedy to fix that application. I'd like to, just as a policy, have kind of a two-step denial process. So rather than on that first meeting, we're like, sorry, it's, which is what we do now. We're going to deny it. And if it follows those items of reconsideration, it's denied. If something's denied, that applicant can't reapply for a year. They have to go through the whole process again. So what I'd like to do is, and this is at the discretion of the council, whether to allow this, is, there's things that they might be able to remedy that are things they can remedy. There are examples that are things they can't remedy. An example would be, we had an applicant who had that property next to Fisher's where they wanted to put in something that was not allowed in the use of that zone. You can't remedy that. That's a whole rezoning and things like that. But we also have applicants that might be able to fix a few things here and there that are called out in code as not being compliant, that if they can bring that into compliant, we'd like to try to say yes more than we say no. So if we identify that type of applicant that, has come to council and we're all, and there's a leaning towards a denial of that project, I'd like to see if we kind of just have a culture of, we're going to give you one shot, right? Have a two-step denial process. Is your application has these holes in it, but if you work with staff and you can fix them, we're going to let you come back, at a date certain, represent before we issue a final decision of either approval or denial, and see if they can remedy those things as a way to say yes versus no. It's not in every application. It would happen rarely. I can't think of, we rarely deny projects, one, because we have such a good planning and zoning. But if there are those type of cases, I'd like to say, okay, let's have a two-step denial process where we're going to give you an opportunity to make those changes and then give you a shot at it, work at it. We can still say no, right? They still have to follow code. They still have to do all those things, but at least it gives them the opportunity to at least have one more shot at trying to get their application into compliance to gain an approval. So that was just something that, in the spirit of just how do we, to Councilman Jorgensen, we've got odd size lots, we've got odd size things. What can we do to be as flexible as we can? So just an idea. It's not a code thing. It'd be more of just a policy of, if we have that situation come up, which again doesn't happen very often, that if we deliberate that way and we see that there's that type of opportunity where someone might be able to remedy a few of their things, that we give them an opportunity to do that before we issue a final decision. So that's kind of my request on that, if we kind of have that. Again, a complete discretion of the council. So that's probably not something we, it's not something you put in code or anything like that. It's just something, something that we follow if we have that situation. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Director Thornborough, and you can discuss. This is not a public hearing, it's a resolution. And if you can go over the changes that you see in the resolution and answer questions, that'd be great.
Mayor, thank you. The reason that you're seeing this back again tonight was this policy was adopted just in February of this year under ordinance 123426. But the discussions at the time of the adoption was to please bring this back to look at it concurrently with the ordinance that we just got through discussing. There are, as identified in your packet on page 135 in the staff report, there are a few changes. There's an addition of a definition section, an addition of an interpretation section, standardization of time noticing timeframes, not of time frames, but we had changed some noticing to 17 days to go out. And staff has asked, if we're going to have 17 days, can we have 17 days for everything? So it's not 17 days for this, 15 for this, and so on and so forth, just so they have one number in their head to keep track of. The one exception is for the legal ad that goes into the newspaper. And that's because we have to do it ahead of time to meet that deadline anyway. And so that's why that one looks different. And then as the mayor just noted, there are reconsideration provisions on page 168 or page 30 and 31 that have been redrafted to try to strictly follow what LUPA says in its one paragraph that provides guidance for reconsideration. As previously noted, I met with Councilmember Carver Herbert earlier, and she had some great finds as she went through and reviewed this, noting that there's an image that needs to be updated to reflect the neighborhood notice on-site notice that reflects old information. So we'll need to update that information. As previously noted during the public hearing for ordinance 1051-26, there's the possibility to relocate the noticing table into this ordinance, and a suggestion to better clarify what's a 300-foot radius notice for neighborhood meeting. I think we also heard that discussion through the hearing we just had versus what is a 300-foot radius notice for public hearing. And based on that discussion as well, I think that it needs to be slightly amended to make sure that the standing for neighbor or for design review is liberally applied versus requiring that there be something written back to the city. We certainly could move forward and adopt it if you like those changes as identified, or this could come back again with the ordinance 1051 if you prefer. And with that, I stand for questions.
So,
Any questions for Director?
Mr. Mayor, just a couple other clarifications.
Councilor?
Yes, because we did have the conversation, I wanted to be on the record at least about a couple things. We did talk, and we talked about this previously, about the 17-day response period within the neighborhood meeting. Actually, that information was not in the previous ordinance. It's actually in this, but we had a little bit of conversation in our last deliberation about that. But I just wanted to be really clear. There are questions. Miss Jackson Hunt brought this up in her testimony about her concern about this, and it's been a concern of mine as well, is oftentimes that 17 days is the neighbors interested parties get this information directly from the applicant. And I do believe that the templates that staff has put together, I think really goes a long way in helping to provide clarification and ensuring that neighbors have adequate information. But some of the pieces that sometimes are a little concerning that aren't necessarily available at that time that an applicant has a neighborhood meeting is oftentimes all of the agencies that provide, our partner agencies that may provide their feedback may not necessarily be available at that time. A staff report doesn't provide a staff report until later. The questions of findings is what findings would this applicant need to meet in order for this application to get approved. It's my understanding, and I did see that in what this addresses is the applicant is required in their to provide what those findings would be, and I think that helps. But part of my concern about limiting people to just within that 17 days to be able to provide any feedback to that is it kind of forces them into providing less valuable feedback. And certainly the remedy is if more things happen later on, they can certainly appeal. But the challenge about an appeal is you're limited to what's in the public record. And if you are only limited to those 17 days of what can be put into the public record, then you may, at that point, all the information that could potentially be available to someone to be able to see fully would not necessarily be available to them until after those 17 days. And so I apologize because that was a point that we hadn't really talked about in any depth, but I thought about it after our conversation. So it sort of handcuffs folks that that an appeal is a possible remedy for them, but if they are limited to what's on the record, then they don't have the ability to bring forward additional information that became available to them after that 17-day window. And so that's where I really am struggling with the fact that they only have those 17 days. Now, I would say by and large for probably the 80% or 90% of the applications that come through the city, that's probably more than adequate because there isn't a lot of feedback. And certainly now we know through this code that we're proposing that if 10 or more interested parties are interested and they about a particular application, then we know that those applications will automatically be pushed to a hearing before council. So that resolves, I think, most of my concerns about it, but I do believe it leaves a little bit of a window that are people so handcuffed that they aren't able to get any information in the window that could be valuable because they don't have access to other information that's not even in the record at the time they're required to provide that feedback.
So we went from 15 days to 17 days. We put in the 10-day, ability for people. So are you making a recommendation on how many days it should be?
Well,
because we don't want to make it so long that
I agree, and
time.
I guess maybe this would be a question for you then, Director, is when are the other agencies? So we have ACHD, we have the engineer, we have ITD, we have all of those folks. How long do they have in order to provide their information?
Mayor, Councilmember Carver Herbert, they would be within that time frame as well. The idea is the way that it's set up currently is that after the neighborhood meeting is held, the applicant can submit, and then the record is compiled, staff reviews it, and on that, say, 18th day, then a decision can be rendered. And that's the current setup. I think that you're suggesting that after the record is completed and a decision's made, but that is where the appeal would come in.
Right.
So I'm not happy to noodle on how to fix it, but I'm not quite sure the direction that you're thinking.
Okay. This one has been troubling to me. Came up in our conversation a couple months ago. It still continues. It came up in our testimony tonight. And it's not as we know, that it only appeals or it only applies to such probably a small percentage, but when it applies to that particular percentage, maybe the fact that it gets kicked up for a public hearing may be adequate enough. But I guess maybe this would be something I would look to my colleagues if you have any other input or thoughts around this. And then again, just the standing question, I think we've gotten that resolved, but that came up with this as well. Oh, yeah, I think we have covered all of the other points that I think are important to make sure that they're in the record. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Director Thornborough?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember?
Director Thornborough, do we know what other cities, what their timeline is regarding submitting an appeal or request for reconsideration? Is it 17 days? Is it 21 days? Do you know?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, our design review process is quite different. We have this administrative with notice process. I can certainly compile how other cities are doing that. I might I would request that that come back instead of me trying to think through it off the top of my head.
But Director, do you believe that at day 17, there's enough public information to make a reasonable application for reconsideration or appeal?
Mayor, Council Member Jorgensen, to Council Member Carver Herbert's point, I think that the vast majority of the projects that go through tend to not be as complicated as the ones that you tend to see when they filter up to public hearings or they're before you. Many times applications go through the process without any input from the public or agencies for that matter. We do send out by law agency reviews when we get these applications in, but often the record's pretty thin.
I think for my preference is we cater to the norm, not the outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions for Director Thornborough? So we have a decision, council. We can, and I think what I would recommend is there's a few things, or if you're ready to vote on it, we can. Certainly we can vote and adopt, or we can just put it together with on the 11th with the 1050-26 and kind of wrap those up in a bow. And I think that's probably what I would suggest, or unless you're prepared to vote on the reconsideration resolution now.
Mr. Mayor, I have a
Councilor
question
Finch?
for you. You gave a preamble to this resolution, 1245-26, suggesting kind of a two-step opportunity before a denial.
If appropriate, yeah.
I love the idea that we're going to be more kind of easier to work with and say yes more than no. I love that idea as well. In my experience, I've seen applications that had red flags at the design review level back when we had that kind of more of that old process. Then they went to planning and zoning, and the staff report is painted red, right? Mm-hmm. Not compliant, not compliant, not compliant, not compliant, not compliant. Then then the application proceeds and it comes to us with no substantive changes. Right? I don't, and I realize you said not every case, but I want to make sure that we're not making something into due process.
Right. Yeah.
That isn't a due process.
Yeah. So in my opinion, in that case, it's council choice, right? And so if someone is not listening, right, in your example, they're not listening, then you wouldn't grant them that.
Okay.
And so what I'm thinking is it may go to P&Z, and let's say it's a 3-2 decision, right? And so 3 of the P&Z commissioners say no and 2 say yes, right? And so then it's got to come to council on, in your packet, it's a denial, right? But obviously there are 2 P&Zs that may have looked at it and said, I think this is okay. And so if you all are leaning towards a denial, that's just a matter of, man, if they can tweak these and those commissioners would say yes, then let's give them, rather than just denying it right there, because that's what P&Z said, it's like, let's give them a 2-step process. Let's try to have them fixed, because usually a lot of those things are things that might be code changes, maybe a setback is off, whatever the landscaping that they can adjust, rather than saying no, pushing them back a year, doing all that. We're trying to get this developed. We're going to give them the option. And so really it's more and more of those things that it's kind of case by case, right? Versus I have someone who's not listening and not paying attention and making no effort. I'm just going to take a shot at council to see what they say. Well, you're not making a good faith effort to try to conform and clean up those red flags. We're not going to know, right? And so I think that is clearly up to the council's decision. It's just kind of those cases where it's like, man, they can just remedy a few things and we might be able to make this go. Let's give them one more shot at it. You only get one shot, right? I'm not saying delay it and delay it.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
I appreciate the
that's
clarification.
more of my thought process. Abusers don't get that privilege.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I just want to make sure that we're not rewriting LUPA.
Oh,
And
no.
it sounds like you're not wanting to do that at all.
Not at all. And
Okay.
they have to conform to code, right? And so if they have a code issue that needs to be remedied, they have to remedy that code. And if they may not, and then it's like, well, we gave you 2 shots. Sorry, it's still a denial. Or it's like they worked with Jenna and the department,
Okay.
and we fixed
Thank
it.
you.
Let's say yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Was my intent. So I should have clarified that a little bit better.
Mr. Mayor, as a follow on to your question about this process, would you envision that you would keep a public hearing open?
Well, there's no public hearing on this one. This
No,
one.
no, I'm not on this. I'm referring to your process of if we have an applicant that comes forward
Yes.
and they're kind of still missing the mark, but
In that case, because you don't want to renotice and things like that, we would keep the public hearing until date certain. And they, like I said, I can't think of very many times when I was on council that actually happened. So I think it's really rare. But it's just if we get that situation where we really want to try to help these people develop and make, and it may take some minor changes on their part rather than give them a hard stop and putting them back for a year and causing them time and money. I'd like, all right, let's see what we can do. That's just the intent. So what is your thoughts on either voting to adopt this resolution 1245-26 or pushing it to a date certain of May 11th with the with 10/51/26?
well, Mr. Mayor, I think I'm not entirely clear on what the standard is that we're using for reconsideration, because if you look at the ordinance that we just spent a great deal of time talking about, I think it was assuming that we would use the same criteria, because it actually said appeal and reconsideration. So, and it's also my understanding, I think that there might be a little bit of a difference of opinion in terms, or not even opinion, I think thoughts that have been shared with us of what we see in this reconsideration in this document versus what we saw in some previous documents. And I believe even that we may have, was even in Mr. Wadham's memo, I believe that there's a difference. So it would be helpful to me if there could be an explanation about the differences and the points of view of why one versus the other.
Director Thornborough?
And Mr. Mayor, well, if I may, while she's getting up to the podium, the main question I have for the council is whether the council would like to accept new evidence on a request for reconsideration or not. And if I could get some clarity, that would help staff, I think.
Mayor, members of the council,
On a request for reconsideration, Lupa is very brief on what the standards are. It does require that there's a deficiency found in the decision. But I believe that Mr. Wadden's memo was trying to state that if that reconsideration is granted, that doesn't follow through, that you could open that up a little bit more. And the difference between his memo and what came out was part of the sausage making in the background before it gets to you. And so discussions of could we put standards in or not? And then his analysis went on a discussion that ended up being taken back out before it came to you, just as a strict, this is what state statute says. And you're correct right now in that ordinance piece. It is set up to follow the same as an appeal in the grounds for acting on a reconsideration. And certainly just did hear Mr. Wadhams ask, is that what you would like it to do? So thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor.
This is another one I thought a lot about this weekend. So being on planning and zoning is a great experience because you really get to see more of some of the nuts and bolts and details that happens with land use applications. And in my view and in my experience, that process has, as you like to say, yes, written all through it. They have the opportunity, working with staff, to remedy any deficiencies in code and really work through that and partner with staff to get this thing to a point that can go in front of planning and zoning. And they have the wherewithal, the applicants have the wherewithal to ask for a continuance if they're not ready. I mean, we saw that with a recent application that it was continued for quite a while at the request of the applicant. So I think there's, again, in my view, and I appreciate that whole strategy of just being a city that says yes, and I love that. But I think we're already doing that, in my opinion. There's plenty of incentive, and I want to maintain that incentive for applicants to have it buttoned up by the time it gets to planning and zoning or us if it comes to us. And I fear, and maybe I'm wrong, but I fear that if we take that incentive away, that there would be basically the original planning and zoning or the original council meeting and then a reconsideration. I don't like that. Just feels like it takes advantage of our process a little bit, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I'd like to maintain how we have it. I think there is opportunity for applicants to come to hearings. Is they should be able to have a package that's baked as best as they can get it. And then that allows us, knowing that there's only one opportunity, to say, okay, this applicant has done everything in their power. Then it allows us to more strongly consider waiver requests and anything that we may have to do outside of whatever code specifically may say. So the last thing I'll say is I would like to not consider new evidence in a reconsideration request. Again, it just goes back to there's been opportunity to get everything buttoned up and baked, that's your opportunity. You have all kinds of time. We'll continue it as long as you want to keep continuing it. And that takes a lot of staff's time when they do that. So that's the other thing. I'm afraid that not doing that will add more time to staff. And I kind of I feel I want to avoid that as well too. So I want to keep incenting them to be done by the time it gets to us.
So, I mean, I agree. And I think that's why when I made my comment about kind of as two-step, it's going to be rare, and it's probably in those cases where there might be a split decision on P&Z and things like that, and they want to go to council to get our opinion on that. And so, and because P&Z might be split, right?
Sure.
An example. So they're coming to us, we're going to hear it, and we might be split on council. It might be, a 3-1 decision. We've had plenty of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe if it's 3-1 in the denial, obviously one council member thought that they had a pretty good application. Do we give them one more shot to clarify, to try to get the other three, to fix those? That's kind of the example I'm thinking.
I understand.
And we have a lot of novice developers in our town because of that. And so I think, they're trying to navigate that. They've never worked in front of a council before. They don't know how we're going to decide. So, it would be simply if we felt there was justification for it. It's not a written resolution. It's not, or it's more of just a kind of like, do we want to be able to, if we have that opportunity, to be able to give people that opportunity, right? Again, I think it happens rare because, but that's kind of the example when I was thinking about it. It's like, yeah, in that scenario.
Yeah.
But, if they, to council member pages, if they're not working within the system, they're not listening, things like that, then the answer is no. Right. And I think Mrs. Thornborough, Director Thornborough would have a pretty good idea of like, what's been how has the applicant been to work with? Right.
Right. And I should say more clearly too, I really do appreciate the idea behind this. I do, but we're trying to do the right thing to help applicants succeed in our city, which, my point is that I think we're already doing that.
Well, and I think as our code gets revamped the next couple of years, won't need a need for that.
And I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. So that was just an example. I was just trying to think of how do we say yes?
Yeah.
No, all I could come up with. So you guys may not agree. And again, it's up to the council on those decisions. It's just an idea that
I appreciate the time to, let me give my opinion, sir.
Yeah. And I don't even know it's something you vote on. It's just whether you do it or not.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Page.
Mr. Wadhams asked for an opinion
Yes.
on, do we allow new evidence or do we consider new evidence? My answer to both is no.
Okay.
The reason that I feel that way is because I feel like if we allow new evidence on these reconsideration applications, we're doing a disservice to all of the members of the community that came and didn't support that, because now we're hearing a whole new application and possibly approving that without them having a chance and opportunity to be heard. Mm-hmm. So I think that's dangerous water. Good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, for clarification, if a reconsideration was granted, I'm trying to think through the process. Isn't public testimony, isn't it held open?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I think it depends on what the code says, but my recommendation would be if you're accepting new evidence on a reconsideration, that you should have a new public hearing.
Yeah.
So the people that have a right to voice their opposition or their support, because now it's a new application. So if that's the direction that the council wanted to go, I would recommend you have a second public hearing on that reconsideration.
Can you define new evidence just to make sure we're on the same page?
Yeah, and I should say new evidence or, curing deficiencies in the application or whatever, anything that wasn't before the council at the time that the council made a decision. If you're accepting, the densities changed or the heights changed, or, they addressed things that were the concern. Now that's I don't know if you want to call it new, maybe additional information. If it's not new, it's definitely additional. And so that if people opposed to that application, they should have, under due process, they should have a right to come back and tell the council why they still don't like it.
So keep the hearing open.
Keep the hearing open, or just open it, notice it back up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, President of Council, if the reconsideration, if it's allowed and the new information being provided cures and is in direct response to the council saying this would be denied for this, that, and the other, and the request for reconsideration, and we allow only new information that is relative to curing those deficiencies, would that be acceptable?
So that comes down to strategic decision making on the council's part. I'm a big fan of approving applications with conditions of approval that are exactly what we want to see. And then the choice is up to them, right? There's really nothing to have us reconsider. We've approved it, right? Either you meet those conditions and build your project, or you don't. But I'm a big fan of approving things with the conditions that we want to see, and it won't be a rug pull because it's exactly what's in the staff report. The idea of taking on new evidence and having a new public hearing goes to public fatigue of hearings and a sense that as a member of the public, you kind of get one bite of the apple and an applicant gets two.
Would you have a second public hearing, or would we just keep it open, I guess?
Well, how do you keep it open and deny it, where you would get a motion for a reconsideration, right? A decision would have been made, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking for a reconsideration, right?
But again, apologies if you're okay with just having some kind of back and forth conversation there. If the public is, we assume we're representing the public, we say, hey, this thing needs to be cured because your neighbor wants a bunch of landscaping between your property and the next property. And the applicant is like, okay, didn't understand that. Now I'll put 6-foot trees or whatever. And that would remedy it for the potential public contribution. Somebody that wouldn't they also be benefit from the allowing the applicant to come back in with the new information?
In that example, yes. But I think there's other examples where we see a different project. A completely different project.
But without being able to predict how each one would behave, do you err on which side? The assumption that the applicant's going to do a rug pull, or that the applicant is going to satisfy this council and the neighborhood or business neighbors' concerns?
Yeah, great question. I feel like it's just case by case basis, right?
So if that's the case, would we want to allow new evidence so we can treat it on a case by case process?
I'm generally a fan of a closed record. That's I guess where I stand, for reasons that probably align with my career.
Sure, yeah.
That's how it's done in the courtroom, and I like that. Everybody knows what to expect. And I'm one vote.
Yeah. And your point of view is your career, and so is mine. And so, as an example, I manage a large team, and I have variable compensation that I can grant. And so there's black and white guidelines. We're going to pay you out for this performance. However, if one of my team comes to me and says, but this was beyond my control, I did this, that, and the other, I have the discretion to go back and reconsider it and say, that's fair, or, no, it is what it is. But without a presentation of what they want me to see that wasn't in that black and white agreement, it would be difficult for me to reward or not change their behavior. And so that, that's my perspective, is like, my world is I have to sometimes make on the fly, give me the latest information that somehow I missed, or that the environment changed to impact this application in this case.
In your example, respectfully, there's not an opposing party.
Well, the opposing party would be management, right? Because this is what we gave you. You live within this rule. So then they have the opportunity to also deny it, right? Because in the same role, I'm representing that employee to owners.
If I may.
Of course. I'm just
Jump into the
I
conversation
really
here.
have a kind of a rich understanding of this, because I understand attorneys generally and very needing the black and white law. We need that, absolutely. I'm trying to understand where the application in the real world kind of comes together and how we make it work, right? I get it. Like, I'm probably more nervous about hey, we want to have a two-step process, because even for me, I'm like, okay, but what does that look like, right? I like to have guardrails, but I also like to look at it but when it, as a decision maker representing individuals, in this case, our residents or businesses, at what point and how do I trigger a common sense or a needed, but we didn't know this, or that piece of information or that document really could
Fixed
it. Yeah, or you fix that, particularly if it is in instances where we're receiving things, and I thought it was brilliant is to, when we receive it, we get a document that says planning and zoning made this recommendation. We don't necessarily see every time how that vote went down. So anyway, thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it.
And Mr. Mayor, I should have said, if I may, to you, addressed you when I said that. In that example, I think, well, at least in the example of the city, we're talking about the city in relation to your example, that everything is laid out from early on. I'll just say early on. I don't know if that's the same. I mean, you could speak to if that's the same in the example you used, but for a land use application, working with staff, the applicant knows everything, even if they haven't read through it all, but at least it's all there. They know where they got to end up when all is said and done. It could be a year from now, it could be 18 months from now, or it could be 2 months from now. So I'm not saying it's different. It just feels different in my mind than the example you used. But feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think it should feel different, because you're operating off of code, and there's tons and reams of words wrapped around, and there's delineated processes and steps. And so I understand that, and I understand, hey, we've outlined this, we've made it as clear as we possibly can. Follow the process, check the boxes, ensure that everything that we've asked of you, you've responded to and provided those information. So, and by the way, we have an awesome staff that's going to help you. Well, if I correlate that to my business, I hand them a 5-page document stating this is how you're going to be paid. This is the compensation. This is the expectation. If you don't follow this, you're up for termination, right? So it's a little more stark, right? Because it's for, but I have the latitude, just as I said, is if they get to the end of a quarter and they're compensated off of quarterly performance and they're like this, that, and the other. And I'm like, but you knew this, that, and the other. Why? And then they whip out and go, my competition came in and undercut me by 30%. And you wouldn't meet that price. And I'm like, okay, that's a fair ask to reconsideration and create an exception. I'm kind of going down a wild, but you understand that in my world, there are causes that for me translate to show me why I should reconsider this. And if even though everything has to be turned in, everything has to be documented, and it does, if there's a piece of, there's a missing signature on something, and they're like, and they've turned in 100 of these packets, they know it required, they missed it once, I'm not going to penalize them. I'm going to say, you made it through the whole process, you missed that signature. Can you remedy that within 2 weeks or whatever the parameters are? And I will allow it because I know that that breeds higher performance. It's better for the company. It's better for my customers, and it's better for the morale of the team. So that's just an example. Apologize for monopolizing all the words.
Director Thornborough, can I ask you a question? Because I may restate the way I worded that in terms of two-step. I guess probably an easier way for me to restate the two-step denial process is there would just make it a condition of approval the same thing? Like instead of denying it, these are the conditions for approval. Come back in 2 weeks and tell us if you met the conditions for approval, or you approve it based on conditions of approval, and you're done, right? So maybe I was overthinking that, trying to be clever, but I think maybe when it boils down to it is council can put conditions of approval on the applicant that says, we're going to deny you unless you can remedy these conditions of approval. So I guess the question is in that case, Mr. Watt, do you approve it with conditions of approval, or do you say, come back and tell us that you met those conditions of approval, and then we'll approve it? I think that's probably a better way to state maybe what we want is just allow flexibility of council to say, and to your point, condition of approval is put in a 6-foot tree and you're fine, versus I just don't want to say hard no on things that could be remedied with the condition of approval and kicking that back for you, right? And so maybe that's a different way to look at it. I just didn't think it through well enough and just popped in my head. Can you elaborate maybe on that idea?
Mayor, certainly conditioning applications customary, and we often see almost every application that goes through with a level of conditions. I would think that the idea that you proposed might be if council can't see a way to condition it. I can't think of a great example, but if it's like, how in the world are they going to get there with the condition without completely scrapping this application? Then I would say perhaps can you fix it? Do you want us to pause for another 2 weeks? Might be more appropriate, but if you go almost any section of code, add another tree, meet the setbacks, do this, that, or the other, you could probably condition.
Just condition it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Why didn't think that earlier?
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman?
I obsessed a lot about this over this weekend because as a process person, I was trying to figure out under what circumstances do we do reconsiderations. And there are different times that we might do a reconsideration, because we can do a reconsideration on a decision that planning and zoning made. So, well, what happens, planning and zoning makes the decision. It gets the option that applicant has, and I'm asking for Director Thornborough to correct me if I'm wrong. The planning and zoning makes the decision to deny. It can be appealed to us. At that point we have, and we're making some final decision. We've not yet decided for sure what the standard of review that we're going to settle upon, but whatever that might be. And if then at that point, that decision is that we would stick with the original decision, then the applicant then has one last chance to ask for reconsideration, because it's required by state law to do that. So that's one circumstance, because planning and zoning is a decision maker. The applicant has the opportunity to appeal it. We then hear it at that point in the game. But that's a little bit different when we are the decision maker. So we have planning and zoning is the recommending body. We are the decision maker in that body, and then we make the decision. And because there isn't the only appellant option at that point for somebody to appeal to would be going to judicial review, but they're required to go through reconsideration first. That's, I think, originally I was kind of on board with what you were saying, that would happen not in the reconsideration component, but in the decision-making component is where that would happen. But now that I think that we've talked more and more about this idea of the opportunity to use conditions of approval as being a better option, I think I'm leaning more in that direction. I think with all of that said, it takes me back to this point that I believe that reconsideration should be non-de novo, that's not the place where the applicant has the opportunity to try to resolve it, because I believe it's laid out for the applicant pretty clearly about what they need to do. And so that's my thought, because I think particularly the ones that go through planning and zoning, it gets probably even more opportunity for us to take a look at it. And then I think they have a little bit less, because when we become the decision maker, you get planning and zoning's opinion and recommendation, and then we decide whether we agree with that or not. And then we make, because of information that comes into us during that hearing process, we can make that decision at that time. And if for some reason we, think that it's good enough, looks like the applicant's meeting 5 of these conditions that they were not meeting, or they were agreeing in their hearing process. They said, okay, we saw what planning and zoning said. I'm willing to fix these 5 things. But yes, there's still these 3 other things that are hanging out here that haven't been resolved. These are important to us as a council. Would you be glad to go back and do that? Or we'll just make those as conditions? So we can, I think I'm getting there, that I think the conditions, it's still a non-de novo, no new information in reconsideration.
I think we've had cases where we've added conditions. I think we've had a few applicants for P&Z, and I can't remember the specific case where we, Page to Perfection might have been one where we said, well, we added, well, you can't, we're not going to allow you to turn on the marigold. I think was, the condition that council added. I don't know if I can't remember correctly, but anyway, we can, I think it goes. So I guess, Mr. Wadhams,
Mr. Mayor.
I want to make sure we're not going down a rat hole on this. Really, the resolution is not necessary. I just want to make sure can you level set us on what whether this discussion is relevant or is it just kind of or do we write that in there I think we might be getting a little off the tracks.
Mr. Mayor, apologies, but before we go there, I do have one question for Director Thornborough that I think is an example where we were in a reconsideration for the boardwalk, and the argument was over parking, and what was allowed in was simply a diagram that represented the parking allocation And that was the piece that changed because it clarified that and explain, because we thought it was wrong. I thought it was wrong. But if you recall, that came in under reconsideration, I believe. I know it came in under reconsideration. And I think that that we did allow new information, and it was the parking calculation diagram.
Ms. Thornborough.
However, I would also add that that would tie to the fact, well, they said that we got it wrong and brought in new information. So I kind of, if the reconsideration is, hey, city council, you got it wrong, I think you have to allow them to demonstrate how we got it wrong.
Well, they cited to an error,
Oh,
which
okay.
is what we want them to do.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to try to answer Councilmember Jorgensen's question as well. But regarding the mayor's question, to level set, we're talking about proposed resolution 1245, which is an omnibus policy that covers a lot of different things. So far tonight, really the deliberation, to the extent that we've had one, is about request for reconsideration, but that resolution touches a lot of things in addition to the request for reconsideration. So I think what I've heard from all the council members that spoke is that I didn't hear any council member that wanted new evidence except for potentially council member Jorgensen, but I heard council member Rasmussen say no new evidence. I heard Council President Page say no new evidence, and I heard Council Member Carver Herbert say no new evidence. So what I heard is 3-1, and based on that, if it's continued, then that gives me enough to work with to come back with a proposal that I think fits the intent of what I just heard. I also think, in the interest of time, we have a lot of stuff on the agenda still tonight, that we just continue this matter till May 11th, and Ms. Thornborough and I can sit down and try to come up with something that's obviously LUPA compliant, but also clarifies that no new evidence. But Councilmember Jorgensen does bring up a good point, because historically we've allowed it, but now we're asking what's the policy, and let's get it written down so everybody, the public and everybody, knows what the standard and what the policy is. So there's the general rule, and then you're talking about like exceptions to the general rule. And I think staff would love instruction and guidance from the council on that policy issue. I think you could do it one way or another. But 1245-26, back to the mayor's question, request for reconsideration is only a small piece. So if you wanted to look at the other things, I would recommend continue it. Even if you just want to focus on the request for reconsideration, I would recommend continue it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember?
I move to continue resolution 1245-26 to a date certain of May 11th, keeping this matter open, the discussion on this resolution. We have some people from BRS Architects that we need to hear so that they can be on their way, and we can mull over the rest of this agenda without taking other people's time.
Thank you for making that motion.
Second.
Again, okay.
Council President Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so next is, are we on 7?
Yes.
So a public hearing for the rezone of property located at 4902 West Chinden Boulevard. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen. You've had a good example of your governmental work. So, we'll open the public hearing at this time for FY 2026 02 rezone ordinance 1067-26. Sir, step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Curtis, you haven't talked in a while. Curtis Crystal, 2301 Parkside Drive, Boise.
Okay.
I'll make it short.
Thank you.
We agree with the findings and conditions of approval from staff.
Wow, you are.
There you
Sweet.
go.
Love it.
Next time, just because of that, we'll put you first if you have from council again. You'll get rewarded.
Mayor, members of the council, I can't make it quite that short, but I'll try to make it pretty short. The application tonight is for a rezone of the property located at 4902 Chinden Boulevard. And the determination in the staff report is that it does not constitute spot zoning. The request is to go from C2 to C1 zoning district. The adjacent property across the street is zoned C1. And there are three comprehensive plan designations. They are the Green Boulevard Corridor, the Bradley Industrial, and a neighborhood node. The request aligns fairly well with the Green Boulevard Corridor and the industrial designations of the code. And the request is not clearly aligned with nor clearly conflicting with the neighborhood, with the destination node criteria. I do want to point out that in the staff report, there is some discussion about legal lots of record. And elsewhere in the packet, Ms. Veal was able at the last hour to determine that she believes that the lot is a legal lot of record. And so that memorandum did get included. There are two actions that we're asking with a rezone request. The first of which, this is a public hearing, but to make a determination on the public hearing or the file number ZON FY 2026 number 2. And the second of which, if it's approved, is to have the first reading of ordinance 106726.
And
with that,
line item 8. Agenda.
Thank you. And with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions for Director Thornborough? Nope. Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to speak on this rezoning? Anybody on Zoom? Hannah?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor and Council. I know it's been a night. Hannah Ball, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City. I'm in neutral support of this application. I just wanted to bring up two facts that I think would, these conditional use permits are very costly for the applicants. And I know that this was a service related designation, but had it been a retail component, it would have been allowed and the rezone would not have been required. So I just think sometimes if it's a use that the city favors to find the primary use is a retail sales. So I would just possibly look into that. And then furthermore, the chain of title. That's an interesting one that's been coming up more and more, chain of title. When a lot is not conforming, we just designate it as a non-conforming lot. So putting that sort of extra burden on applicants to find that chain of title can be quite a process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Spunk. See any other comments? So we'll close the public hearing. Any other feedback from the applicant or Director Thornborough? Okay, any deliberations on the matter? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember?
I would move that we, on item 7, which is ZON FY 2026-002, it's accompanied with ordinance 1067-26, that we sustain planning and zoning's recommendation and approve.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Are any or none? Clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Council President Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert?
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to G8, a motion for first reading.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we have our first reading of ordinance, and thank you
See you
for
guys.
your patience tonight. Thank you very much.
You guys are awesome.
Continuing my motion, I move that we have the first reading of ordinance 1067-26.
By title only?
By title only.
Oh, by title only. Oof.
And I would second.
Second, okay.
Council President Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
First reading of ordinance 1067-27, an ordinance by the City of Garden City, a municipal corporation providing for rezone of certain real property described herein from C2 mixed use commercial to C1 highway commercial, amending the zoning map of the City of Garden City to reflect said change, providing for servability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item 9, it's resolution by the clerk and treasurer to make deposits from a new bank that we're doing. So, Mr. Wadums.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Lisa Libey put together, this is a Lisa Libey resolution, our clerk treasurer. She did a short memorandum on page 250 of your packet. There's a draft resolution on page 251 of your packet. I was not asked to provide legal review, so I have not conducted legal review on this, but it appears that this resolution is just to give the mayor, the council president, and the city clerk treasurer authorization to make deposits, withdrawals, and transfers between Garden City bank accounts and to receive bank statements or other pertinent information related to all Garden City bank accounts. That is Ms. Libey's request. I have not conducted a legal review of that, but it looks like everything's in order. I stand for questions.
Mr. Wadums.
Yes, sir.
The thing that went through my mind as I read through this is that I think it would be wise for the council to provide our institution, our financial institution, with an affidavit every January that defines who the council president is. Because I'd sure hate for them to think that I'm just always going to be the council president when it's someone else and I go and embezzle a bunch of money.
We're rolling in.
Justice would be out there.
Right. Yeah. So I think we need to give them some safeguards. Like, hey, here's our staff.
I think that's great. Good idea.
I could add that if that is a motion, Council President, to add that, I can definitely add that if there's a second and approval.
It's a suggestion. I don't know. It's open for.
So, Mr. Mayor, I had a question because I would have asked Ms. Libey to describe the process for how signature cards are provided and what safeguards are in place to prevent someone from walking into the bank to change signature card by signing. I believe what Council President Page is suggesting is one solution for that, but that was particularly a concern that I had, is how is this institution going to know, how will the process of doing the signature cards happen? How do they get changed? I think just having some clarity about that, because I support the concept of these three individuals having the ability to do what we want them to do. I think it's the fact that we're changing it from people's names to their titles. The concept makes sense to me. I just would like to have a better sense of what the safeguards are.
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor, if you would like.
Please do.
I will say that the bank contacted me and sent like a DocuSign document that was their version of a signature card. I signed it. It was easy peasy and quick. And, they had assurances that they were sending it to the right person because it was attached to an email address that the clerk had given them. So that's the process, and it seemed to work pretty flawlessly.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember.
I would move that we approve resolution 1242-26 with the amended suggestion by council president to have an affidavit submitted to the institution naming the council president for that year.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Clerk Carl, please.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Council President Page.
Yes.
All right, that the motion passes. Excuse me. Moving on to item 10, resolution 124326, approving a new memorandum between Garden City and IDT. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have a legal memorandum on this one. It starts on page 252 of your packet. I drafted that memo. I also drafted the draft resolution, and I've also reviewed the policy that's Exhibit A to the resolution. What this is a previous agreement with ITD is expiring. The previous agreement was for 3 years, and that allowed our police department, and I think our public works department and our clerk treasurer, but definitely our police department, to have access to DMV records in their law enforcement capacity on their MDTs. That is information provided by ITD. ITD is happy to provide the police department with that information. They just want, they want their liability concerns to be addressed, so on and so forth. This agreement is about the same as the last one from 3 years ago. I recommend approval of this MOA so the police can continue to get that information on their MDTs. I have no legal concerns, and I stand for questions. Thank you. It's a 3-year deal. It's written for 3 years, so this will cover us for another 3 years.
Any questions for Mr. Wadhams? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor. I move that we approve resolution 1243-26. Second.
Motion a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Carver Herbert.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Council President Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to 11, this is resolution to cover the policy for our upcoming town hall meeting and future meetings. Mr. Wadhams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. On this one, I have a legal memorandum on page 260 of your packet. I have a proposed resolution on, get there. Excuse me, I have this ready. On page 266 is the draft resolution. And then behind that is a policy for our townhome meetings, or our, town hall. Some people call it town hall or community forum or open mic night.
Synonymous,
Yep. So I think they're all the same. I'm going to recommend approval, some highlights on this thing, and then I'm going to raise a legal issue that was brought up to me this afternoon, and I'll tell you what my answer to that is. First of all, there were some concerns about this town hall, not really concerns, but everybody wants to be compliant with the Idaho code. So the question is whether you could have all the council members and the mayor present and be an informal town hall where no decisions are made. And the answer is yes, you can, but you have to put a lot of sideboards on it. One, I recommend that there be no deliberation. That could get us in trouble with open meeting laws. Two, I'm recommending that nobody talk about pending land use applications. And so within those sideboards, I think this is something that can be done. And this is definitely something that Mayor Jacobs wants. So I drafted the policy, and it does have those sideboards on it. A couple things I just wanted to point out, because also Councilmember Wendy Carver Herbert helped out with this. She made her revisions. I sent this out to the mayor, asked for his revisions as well. If you look at page 268, there's some compliance safeguards. Section 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4. Those are some things I wanted to highlight. The mayor indicated that he wanted a police officer at town halls for security and safety purposes. So that's put in there, and that somebody's making sure that the rules are followed, so on and so forth. So I'm comfortable with this policy. I think it's legal, and I think it's defendable or defensible in court. Somebody brought a legal question to me today, which is a free speech argument. The person that brought the argument to me said that we cannot restrict what people say during a town hall because that violates their constitutional right to freedom of speech. My response to that is I'm not concerned about that. I think this is narrowly tailored. This is content neutral. You're saying you can come in our town halls and say anything you want, just not about pending land use applications. So you can recite from a book. You can talk about the color of the sky. You can talk about the potholes. Talk about anything you want. Just don't talk about pending land use. And so I think that this is constitutional. I'd be comfortable defending it, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Wadhams. And I've sent all of you a note on how I plan to conduct the meeting. So any questions for me or Mr. Waters?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Page?
just one item I would consider amending if appropriate, and that's going to be on page 268 at the top, and that's going to be 5.1. I believe this would be should be restated to say the mayor or any other council member or city official should immediately interrupt and clarify. Just because I'm guilty of it, being in the middle of talking about something and quickly turning to a matter that could be interpreted as deliberative. We don't want the mayor to be the only one that can
No,
interrupt.
I would agree because you may have to call me out, right? So I think that is a good choice if I were to say something as well. So I think having anybody on council that can do that. So Mr. Watkins, can you just add land use, the mayor or present council members?
Yes, if I'm directed to by council, I'd be happy to. And I've taken the note.
Yeah, mayor and council. I think that's a good suggestion, Councilor Page. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, not a question, just a comment. I do think it's critical that it looks like the policy here tasks a council member to keep notes and keep minutes. And just remember, I think it's important. We've all had to do that before. I feel like it's important to be very vague and generic. You never want your minutes to be too detailed.
Okay. Councilwoman.
We take a nice note from our minutes.
Note to
Yes.
Note
Wendy shall not take minutes.
If you, yeah, trust me, I've been through it. I want to get it.
All right, thank you.
We're done. Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, with those changes, I move to approve resolution. Here it is. 1244-26 for the policy for city town hall meeting. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Council President Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert? Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We are down to our final resolution. This is a resolution adopting comprehensive financial management policies. And this, I think I was reading, this was part of, thought would be fine. I lost my page here.
269.
As part of
Granted.
DEQ's grant application, requesting that. So, Director Schmidt, can you speak to that, please?
So just mayor, members of the council, and also Mr. Schmidt, Lisa Leiby has a staff report on page 269, authored by Ms. Leiby and not Mr. Schmidt.
Correct. Yes. Mayor and council members, Mayor, you're correct. This is part of our DEQ State Revolving Fund grant that we're going after for the emerging contaminants, which basically is hopefully going to help us pay for a new well that we're looking at putting in over on 38th Street. This is one component of that. Once we have this in place, we have a public hearing scheduled for the next council meeting. After that, our grant application package is complete and the process will start at that point. So
Great.
It should be a pretty quick turnaround once we have these two components in place.
This is a very important grant for the city, by the way. It helps us fund a new well. So it's critical. We want to get this moving along. Are there any questions for Director Schmidt? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my legal review for you is I have not reviewed this. I was not asked to review it, so I can't.
Mr. Mayor.
It's pretty standard.
I enthusiastically move to approve resolution 1246-26.
I would second.
Good second. Any discussion? Hear none. Clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Council President Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. This is a very important grant. Okay, moving on. Any unfinished business? Any new business? All right, we don't have an executive session. With that, take a Motion to adjourn.
I so move.
So move.
Second.
Second. With that, we are adjourned. Healthy debate. Thank you all. And we'll see you on Monday at our first.